All right. Okay, we're all set. Okay, wonderful. Welcome everyone. This is Executive Committee meeting January 21st, starting calling the meeting to order 6:39. And first up, we do not have quorum, or one short. Do we have any announcements? Are there no announcements from our officers and chairs? Okay. Any members of the public who have any announcements? We'll adopt the agenda. Okay. Angel, would you please just jump in and do, as a matter of protocol, your spiel, please? Apologies.
Okay. Until further notice, this is Angel Muscane. I'm the district manager for Manhattan Community Board 11. I'm going to share a couple of notes before the meeting kicks off. Until further notice, all meetings of Community Board 11 will be conducted by video conference. Links to register to attend these conferences for each of our meetings are published on the calendar on our website, CB11M.org. To avoid crosstalk and help the meeting run effectively, panelists and attendees are asked to keep their microphones on mute when they are not speaking. It is also helpful to utilize headphones. Those participating by phone can dial *6 to unmute. If you wish to share a question or comment, you may do so by utilizing the raise hands function. I'll monitor these requests to ensure that hands are recognized in turn. Those participating by phone can dial *9 to raise their hand. Committee members will be called on first, and then attendees. Please keep your questions or comments brief. With that, handing it over to Xavier Santiago, Vice Chair of Community Board 11.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Angel. All right. So going back, it looks like we have Deb Levine. Do you have an announcement for us?
Good evening. Just happy 2021. And on behalf of the School of Public Health, we have another free webinar on community health literacy and communications, and we invite you all to participate. And thank you for attending our other webinar on participatory research. It was great, and I will be happy to share the link so that you can share the recording. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other, since we had no announcements from our chairs and executive team, do we have any others from the public? I'm not seeing any.
Marissa has her hand up.
Marissa, yes, please go ahead.
Yes, Deborah, can you drop your information in the chat, please? If you haven't. Oh, okay.
All right.
I sure can. No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, thank you. So we have a few action items before us, and I would like, Adem cannot be here. So if Judith and Angel, if you wouldn't mind opining on why this, well, so first, actually, thank you, informational updates. Mayor's preliminary budget was dropped this week for fiscal year 2022, was released on the 15th. And we have 30 days. EcoDev already addressed portions of it. They're going to circle back with your committee meetings. Please make sure that you address everything, and especially with your liaisons to the Statement of District Needs and Budget Committee with our responses. Angel and the staff have sent out copious amounts of information. Please review them. We also had Councilmember Kalos and Councilmember Ayala. Kalos gave us a more applicable breakdown on how to respond and how to activate. with your responses and how to, and he only has 8 blocks, but he specifically cited a few issues, especially with the Department of Sanitation. We also had Ayala, who also spoke at length. If you would like to discuss that further, Jason, Villanueva, our chair of Standing District, is on. Jason, do you want to add anything to that other than making sure that we're getting the responses out the door at the end of our committee meetings?
No, you covered everything perfectly, Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jason. All right, moving on to our, are there any questions?
Xavier, you now have quorum. We should take roll.
Thank you very much. All righty, and do we have, if we could call the roll, please?
Okey doke.
And then we'll take a motion to adopt the agenda.
Jose Altamirano.
Here.
Adembry has excused. Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Okay.
Present.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. Marissa Mack.
Here.
Judith Fabraro.
Present.
Thank you. David Giordano.
Present.
Nelson's running late. Xavier.
Present.
Jeremiah Schlappman.
He just texted me that saying that he's been ill. So excused.
Stephen Villanueva. Stephen Villanueva. Jason Villanueva.
Present.
Nye Whitaker is running late. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion, Jessica Elliott. Drop the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Judith, adopt it.
Through unanimous affirmation, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. All right, moving on to our discussions and presentations. Thank you very much, Angel, for chiming in. We had quorum. We have our liquor license and applications that are before us. Oftentimes we have opined about the committee doing their work. This, I think, was completely accidental, but if Angel, you would be so kind as to just give us a little bit of history and remind us, I know Marlene is here, whether all the applicants have their information involved so the committee can take a position. Present the full board.
Yeah, so
Well-
Marlene is on, and Marlene has been collecting all the paperwork, so she can speak to it.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, everyone. Yes, all the applicants handed in their paperwork on time.
So there were no questions with that. Did the committee have quorum or was there just a miscounting?
Well,
It was a
I'm here.
miscounting at the meeting.
yeah.
Okay.
That's why you have everything on this evening.
Okay, that's fine then. Does the committee have any questions? We have Enzo Lentini doing business as Enzo Enterprises, new application for wine and beer. Yes, Jude?
Yeah, I'm just before we go forward, I'm really sorry about what happened with quorum. I had just lost a family member the day before. I explained that to Marlene. And I still had Edwin on my mind. So I'm really sorry about that. And I think Marlene made the same kind of error, still thinking about Edwin. But I just want to ask Marlene something, if at all possible. There was one applicant that had a number of 311s, and Marlene said she was going to check into that. Has
Yes,
there been any update?
No, there hasn't been any updates. I contacted the 25th precinct and they're looking into it.
Oh, okay. All right, that's all. I'm sorry. Okay, proceed.
If no one is opposed, I will read into the record A, B, C, and D, each of our applicants. And if there is nothing, as we have held as precedents, when compiling them all together to vote whether up or down, I'm just going to read them into the record. If you have questions, do we have any of the applicants before us this evening, Angel and Marlene? Just in case the committee has questions.
No.
Okay. All right, so liquor license applications. A, Enzo Lentini, doing business as Enzo Enterprises, new application for wine and beer and cider license for a restaurant located at 1885 Lexington Avenue, New York, New York. Zip code 10035. That is cross street of 118th Street. That is our first applicant. Second, El Paso Cafe Corp., new application for wine, beer, cider license for a restaurant located at 1642 Lexington, New York, New York, 10029, cross street 104th Street. Third, Kalua's Cafe Inc., doing business, Kalua's Cafe, renewal application for a wine and beer and cider license, number 1136195 for a restaurant located at 2117 3rd Avenue, New York, New York, 10029, cross street 116th Street. And fourth is Rayo's Bar and Grill Inc., renewal application for a full liquor license, number 1028614 for a restaurant located at 455 East 114th Street, New York, New York, 10029, cross street of Pleasant Avenue. If there are no questions from the committee, do we have a motion to approve these?
I'll motion, Judith.
Is there
Second, Jessica Elliott.
a roll call, please, Angel?
Why do you pull this couch up?
Jose Altamirano,
Yes.
Jessica Elliott,
Yes.
Marissa Mack,
Yes.
Judith Ferraro,
Yes.
David Giordano.
Yes.
No, so it's not here. Xavier Santiago.
Yes.
Stephen is absent. Jason Villanueva,
Yes.
Nye Whitaker. is Not here yet. Motion passes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for taking care of this. And Judith, thank you. Our condolences. Edwin has also been on my mind, and I'm sorry for your loss. And we
thank you.
our thoughts and with your procedure. So moving on to board procedures, Nilsa will be joining us hopefully shortly, so she'll probably have some comments on this. Quorum requirement. I know we've been doing much better with quorum. And as a reminder, because sometimes whether it's an odd or an even, it is half plus one, even if it's a 0.5. So if you have 5, you just need 3, 7, you need how many? 4, and so on. But if you have 12, how many do you need? You need 7. So we just want to make sure these are very simple things, but as we're a bit, for lack of a better phrase, helter-skelter, and running 6 ways from Sunday, some people are having multiple Zooms throughout the day. It is exhausting. But please make sure you are following up. Our staff do a wonderful job in reaching out to our membership to remind them and confirm their attendance. But please, if you have people who are not able to make it, or it's repetitive, or they need assistance, some of our membership had a hard time getting online, such as Frances, but now she's there. And I think that's a beautiful thing, but that's incumbent upon all of us. So that's a quick note there. Angel, did you want to talk about the quorum requirement and public notice? Oh, sorry.
Marissa has her hand up.
Go on, Marissa.
Yes, thank you. I just had a quick question in regards to, scheduling conflicts, and I think just the committees overall and what's needed. So for instance, if someone needs to switch out, or if the time is not convenient for them, how are we addressing that? Or are there going to be updates in April when we have new members come in, or, kind of what's the time frame on that for committees and attendance and quorum?
Okay, that's a great question, Marissa. So with quorum, if there are conflicts, because I know we're jumping around given we only have one Zoom handle, if you are finding a consistent conflict with a member, my recommendation is to raise that to Nilsa and Angel, and please CC myself, and we can identify another committee where they feel they could participate on a regular basis. As for assigning new members and with onboarding of new members that we should hopefully have in April, if there are no delays during the selection process, typically, as you recall in past, that we allow them to attend the meetings and figure out which committees they find themselves most aligned, or where they feel they could apply their best skills. And we typically do that, and then they put their selections in, and then by the September reconvening after recess, they have their assignments and are committed to that process. But if you are finding people that you're having difficulty with quorum, that you should definitely raise that to Nelson, Angel, and myself, so we can facilitate. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Xavier.
Yep. Again, and if you're finding this with any of the committees, raise it ASAP so we can address it. Angel, any comment on quorum and public notice?
No, you're nothing on quorum. Jason had a hand up. I can speak after him.
Sorry.
On
Okay,
notice.
Jason, sorry, I'm trying. Go on, Jason, your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just one of my thoughts was with the bylaws. I know we just recently transitioned with our secretaries, but I would think that we can activate the attendance since it's a new year. I know it's January. Happy New Year to everybody. But I would activate those bylaws and get the attendance going so we could start addressing it with that committee that you guys created last year.
Thank you. We will, so yes, I think you're referring to, are you referring to the elections committee or to the bylaws committee?
No, there was an issue with attendance, with board members not showing up or committee members not showing up, not being, even being excused or not necessarily excused for what we set up. And I believe we're supposed to, like, hold a hearing about that with those that their membership is in question because of their attendance. And I think that just holding that accountability, as that's been constantly brought up in the past with our district manager, would assist us in our process of weeding out who can and cannot make it to meetings.
Thank you for specifying that. I would recommend, Judith, when you have the bandwidth, or if we could get an update from the staff on our full attendance and who's not participating and attending. So
okay, and I thought that as far as the attendance, even if someone is being excused, wasn't there a particular reason that you can be excused for, if I'm not mistaken?
There are reasons you can be excused, but I think that first we have to have the actual charting and record on the record before we can go further with that, and then formal inquiry. But thank you, Jason, very much for raising that. Are there any other questions with attendance?
So I can provide some more clarity on that. So the staff is responsible for populating the attendance tracker and reporting to the secretary. So we will do that before the end of the month, specifically me, because I'm the one that is a little tardy. Marlene and Carly are actually right on point. But before the end of the month, I will have that populated and checked and then submitted to Judith. The committee that's responsible for reviewing attendance is this one. And if upon receiving that report from the secretary with any, notes on members that are having, are exhibiting issues with attendance, then per the due process procedure, then members can be brought up for removal. But there is a process, be brought for removal based on attendance. But that's there's a multi-step process, which is, that has been, codified by the board. But the first steps are a report from us to the secretary, and then it's from the secretary to this body. And then you all decide how you want to proceed. Well, per member, and then it's spelled out in the procedure.
Most members that go before that could be, or probably even should be, often are not taken off for multiple reasons. And it's opening up a can of worms, but it's a can of worms that has to be open every year as part of process. And it's an interesting process for those of you that have not been it. We should do it every year, but sometimes it skips a year. And actually somebody who's on with us tonight had experience being in charge of that process, and it's not an easy one. And they often get a lot of flack for doing their job.
Thank you, David. Quick reminder, just please raise your hand so we can notate and raise things appropriately. Thank you, Angel. We look forward to seeing that in February's executive. On to public notice.
NILSA is now on, so we're at 8.
And I raised my hand.
David raised his physical hands. Yes, David.
Okay, go on, David, and then I'm going to pass
So,
the on to Elsa.
I guess this might tie into this somehow, and maybe not. I was going to think about bringing it up in new business. And not so much for a discussion at this moment, but for food for thought. And then maybe we have a healthy discussion as an executive at our next executive meeting. We are appointed to our positions. We are representatives of the community. I feel that when we are on live, we should be on live. And the fact, I know everybody has different opinions about it, but if we are representing the community as community board members and the public is here, they should see who we are, because in a real meeting, a live meeting, they would see who we are. The people would be on the dais that are executive board members and charge of committees. And I just feel that when we're just the name on the screen, that we're not yet necessarily representing. And I don't mean you don't get off for a second, go to the bathroom, or the kid comes in that moment. But the fact that people, and I want to address it in my committee, but before I address it in my committee, I really want to know what the executive and kind of feel about it before we make any decisions. And not that we even talk about it tonight, because I've given it a lot of thought. So I'm curious to know what other people's thoughts are. And maybe at next meeting, we should bring it up as an agenda item. At work, I to be honest, when I'm paying staff to be on work on a Zoom call, I expect to see them, not a hoodie. They don't come to a meeting and put on a hoodie or put on a hat and turn around. You're there, you're live. And I don't know, again, what other people feel about it, but we should be live. We should be seen. We are representing the community, and they should know that they have our attention. And I think I've gotten lazy with it with this group, in any other group that I'm not with, of not being there. And I don't want to get there because, again, I think we are, again, if we're not representing, then maybe we shouldn't be up here on the screen. That's my opinion. I was going to bring it up in new business, but I thought as we're talking about Zoom meetings and quorum requirements and etiquette and Robert's Rules of Order, we should be present in these meetings and we should be visible.
Great. David, thank you. I think that is a good segue. I'd like to address public notice, and then we'll go to Zoom meetings, because that comment kind of dovetails well with that.
Yeah, David, you jumped the gun by 1.
Yeah. You're improving.
We're going to get to you. You were next. Public notice. We got you, brother. Just give us a second. Public notice, quickly, and it's a simple rule, but an important rule. We are as a community board beholden to the subject to the state's open meetings law, which is very clear as to giving public notice for our meetings, both announcing that we're having a meeting so that folks know when we're meeting and where, be it in person or since last spring here on Zoom. But also, what we're going to be talking about, right? So the agenda, to the extent possible, pardon me, we should be sharing what our committees and our full board is going to be discussing and what's the business on the agenda. Open meetings law does allow for items to be added at last minute should an emergency or should something arise that it has to be done. Otherwise, and most of the time, far most of the time, that's not the case for us. So we do know what our agendas are, or we should certainly know what our agendas are. And it's a simple rule: 72 hours, 3 days. We should have an agenda up. What's the date of the meeting? What's the meeting and where? And what you're going to be discussing. That needs to be up and that needs to be shared. If there are agenda items that have supporting documentation, to the extent possible, that should also be shared. So that folks know not just what the topic is that's on the agenda, but what the substance of the application is. So for example, the Land Use Committee has a land use application before it. We share the materials on our website along with the agenda ahead of time, at a minimum 72 hours, usually a week, if not more. So this is a reminder that that it's not just that we have to do it, but that it's important that we do it. So in the spirit of what David was just saying, we are serving the public and we need to respect both their attention and their time and their ability to participate in our meetings, but they need to be informed in order to participate as best as they can. If they're shorthanded by not receiving proper notice or not having the materials to, more deeply inform themselves, they're at a disadvantage. And that's not really our purpose. Our purpose is to serve them. So we need to meet that minimum threshold of 3 days in advance.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Angel. I see, hold on. Jason, you have your hand up in comment of public notice.
Yes, thank you. I just always had this question that has been in my head for years. It's what about working sessions, right? If you're trying to conduct a meeting to get work done, I get, and I know I'm playing with words, but I guess like if you're trying to bring the group together to get an effort done that supports the agenda of the public meeting, is there challenges with having those types of sessions, or you know what I mean? Like, how do we have to formalize that? Thank you.
Sure. So the Committee on Open Meetings has spoken to that very question and has made it very clear, because we had a meeting with them a year ago, the district managers, and the lead up to all this video conference meetings. So the short answer is no. If you're going to be working on any board business and a quorum is present, that has to be open to the public. That doesn't keep you from having, a couple of y'all, exchanging an email and, formulating something to draft in advance of the meeting. But if there's going to be a quorum present, that has to be open to the public. So you can speak, but you can't have a quorum. So if you have in this case, a 12-member committee, if there are 7 members in that room or on that call, that's a quorum that needs to be made available to the public. But, what are the chances you're going to have 7 members working? It's very rare. But just plan around that is my advice.
So if you have like a subcommittee, let's say 5 members, and 4 of them meet regularly, 5 of them couldn't meet, that's fine, right? Because you haven't gone over the quorum of 7.
If it is a quorum of the committee, then yes. And if it's a formalized subcommittee, that the quorum of that subcommittee is present, then you cannot have that meeting without it being subject to the public.
The quorum of the subcommittee.
Right. So if Nilsa, right, as our chair, were to establish a formal subcommittee of the youth committee, right? I forget how many you have. Let's say it's 12. And you said, okay, I'm going to have these, I'm recommending a subcommittee. She formalizes a subcommittee, the blah, blah, blah youth subcommittee of 5 members. If you have 3 members present, that has to be open to the public.
Okay, so we don't formalize any subcommittee.
This meeting is on the record. So I would, I wouldn't discuss circumventing the open meeting law.
This meeting is on the record. We will follow any and all directions by the open meetings law. And before I just hand it back to Xavier, I apologize. I was commuting, and so in the street, that's why you didn't see my face, David. All right, bye.
No, we know there are exceptions to the rule.
So just to,
summarize.
So I agree with the rule personally, but also, and I want to relate and paint a picture. When we raised this question to the Committee on Open Meetings, they were adamant. It was capital letter no with exclamation marks behind it. They were like, don't do it. Like, Okay.
So
Yeah.
if we did
So-
do
so-
it, we would have to do 72 hours in advance and put
Yes.
a public notice?
Yeah. And then
Can
if
I-
it's like, if it's a Zoom meeting, it's super easy, right? So you give the 72-hour notice, you publicize it, and you're good.
Are we able, like I have a Zoom account. Could I set up a meeting with my Zoom account so that it does
I
not
think
limit?
So long as the information to join that meeting is shared by the community board and the public has the ability to join that, then yes.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Thank you. I hope that clarifies it for you, David. Again, reiterating, a task force, a subcommittee must be assigned by the chair. That has to happen. You have a handful of people as a small group, like 3 people out of a 12, doing some work, but they have to report back, which we're going to get to later on this discussion with board procedures. They would have to report back because that has to be declared to the public. I'm going to now go and recognize Marissa, who has had her hand patiently raised. And then I will come back to Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. Just one quick question. So I know, for example, for EchoDev, we had a late reply in terms of someone presenting, which was great, but I know we had reached out, Angel, you had really reached out in time, and it was just like a late response. So do we have a cutoff where we say, look, if somebody's responding that we reached out to with enough time, and let's say they respond like, a couple of hours, well, let's not say a couple of hours, but maybe like a day before our meeting, are we going to adjust the agenda, or are we just going to say we'll table you for next month? Like, how do we handle, late responses, and what do we do with that?
That's a really good example. So what I would say in that case, since it was an invitation for the presenter to provide an informational update, and it was a last minute confirmation, I think we're okay because there was no business. So we're just hearing an organization share something. We want to encourage people to confirm earlier because we also want to give the public every opportunity to hear that update. But in this instance, we were not able to. So then I think the onus is on us to reflect as best as possible in the minutes that are also shared publicly what the substance of that update was. I can't remember. One of those two.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, good. If everyone has addressed their questions with public notice, I think it's a good segue into Zoom meetings, which we already raised an issue from David, and I think it's fairly relevant. Angel, I'd like to open it up for your comments with it, and then I'd like to say a few comments on how we.
I agree with David.
Yeah.
He's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things we've done, and on meetings that are outside of Community Board 11, is that treat it as if you're in the meeting there. If you have to leave for a break of sorts, and we all know what we're talking about because we're sitting in our chairs, we're debating the issues, we typically will conduct ourselves, and when you go off camera, it's for that reason. For lack of better terms, a bio break, and that is why you are leaving. But I think having that engagement, being able to see the faces, for the public to see you, imagine you're in the room. I do agree with that. Occasionally, when I've been on meetings, I've had to stop the screen because my eldest or youngest comes in, and I'll be candid, it's right after bath time. Not appropriate. So I have to go correct them and send them back out and close the door. So, but again, I think as an aside, I do agree with that. I also, one of the other things I just wanted to raise is that observing the conduct that's laid forth, the rules, using the application to raise your hand. And I appreciate sometimes it is challenging because we have discovered in this process that certain computers cannot be upgraded to a software within Zoom. And there are limits on it. There are also limits with cross-platform capabilities. So if you're using your phone right here or your iPad, it doesn't all work the same. It's not seamless. And that's a problem that we are challenged with. But I think trying to work within that construct. One thing I do want to say, and personally, because having attended Borough Board a lot recently, one of the comments that have been stated across, not just in Manhattan, but across all the other boroughs, is that we have issues with cross chat in the chat. And if we are in a committee meeting, okay, or we are at full board and we're all sitting in the auditorium of Mount Sinai, and I look forward to that day, or we're at Silberman or wherever, or when they rebuild Children's Aid Society over on 101 and we're able to have a meeting there. You should not be having multiple chats with 5, 6 people. And this is just something that this has come up in the other boards that I participate in that has also been opined on. I know the impulse. So again, I would like to hear Angel and Nilsa's thoughts on this, definitely. But unless it's a conveyance of information, we are on the public record. And there are people who have dialed in, such as a member such as Judith. There are members of the public who've dialed in, and they can't see the chat. And that, I find, it denies them that transparency. And again, this is not, we're adjusting. It's a little bit of chop, a little turbulence. We're fine. But I think just getting it out and saying like, look, unless it's like, oh, I had, for example, in my instance, a bio break and I missed something, chat, oh yeah, this is what they said. You don't, it was asked. Okay, good. I'm good. I have all that information. That may be an example. Do we need to do that? But again, it's our participation. So imagine in this virtual world, we're physically there like we wouldn't be in any other time. You sit next to one of your community board members. What did I miss? I had to go to the restroom. Oh yeah, they just talked about X, Y, and Z. You didn't really, this was the information dump. We're good. Okay, thank you so much. And we move along. Otherwise, it appears we're not paying attention, even though we may be fully paying attention. So again, it's partly optics, partly functionality. I'd like to turn it over to Angel to hear his comments on that, just on the chat and how we can function going forward and just make us a more efficient board.
Sure. I'm interested in hearing, I have lots of opinions. I'm interested in hearing what the members think. But first I wanted to make a motion to remove bio break from the rest of this meeting.
Throwing shade. Well, what would you refer to it?
I don't not refer to it.
Whatever you want to call it, 10-1, or I have to go, whatever you want to call it. Call it whatever you want. I don't care. But if you're off screen, that should be the only reason. That's the point. Go on.
No, honestly, I do want to hear from the members what they're thinking.
Are there any questions? I see Jason, and I definitely do want to hear Nilsa as well, obviously, as chair. And then, all right, Jason, Marissa, Jessica, and let me go down.
Yeah, I brought this up when we first went remote about defining some of the etiquette with being remote, because I know it's a new process. But my personal opinion, I think the chat should just be taken off. Because when I was in the public session in the Economic Development Committee, what I noticed was, as a participant, you're right, we don't get to see, the public doesn't get to see the conversations that's happening between board members or the information that's shared. And if that information is crucial, like, then it should just be emailed, right? That's the process. And I think maybe we need to define that process. And I do agree as well about the video part. I got a big bandage on my face right now, so I'm dealing with my own, self-esteem. So I don't got the video on, but I always am on video when you guys are having class, or I'm sorry, or doing this. So I'm all for getting rid of the chat, and I'm all for mandating to be on screen. And if you're not, you don't get attendance. I teach classes. You do not have your video on, you're absent.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
Oh.
Was that all?
Yeah, just want to show I'm here. See, bandage, self-esteem.
You still look beautiful, man. You're all right. Marissa.
Very handsome man, Jason.
Thank you.
I actually, well, just quickly, I did mention this actually to someone last, when do we have Echo Job? Tuesday. I don't know what day it is, child.
It was 2 days ago.
Yeah. Like, what day is this? I did mention this to someone. So I don't think we should all together get rid of the chat. I think that it does serve a purpose at times for leaving information answering short questions. But I did mention to someone during that EchoDev meeting not to have full conversations, because that you're having two different conversations. And to Xavier's point, and also to Jason's point, you're not catching all of that information, right? So and then even for the chair, whoever's presenting, there's information that's being missed in the chat. So it's okay if they're like quick questions being answered, somebody's dropping information or what have you, but to have it going as like a whole separate conversation, it's not helpful for not only the presenter, but it's also not helpful for the people who are attending the meeting. So I don't know if there's a way for maybe everyone in their committee to kind of assign someone to, I want to say like the chat monitor, but somebody that's just kind of like, pushing the conversation either to the forefront or to kind of say, maybe you can follow up with this person afterwards or something like that. But I think that there's a lot of information that's missed with the chat overall. So there's some ideas to think about going forward, but definitely agree that it needs to be monitored or something like that.
Okay, thank you, Marissa. I'm going to go to Jessica, then David, and then I have Nilsa, on which.
Awesome, thank you. I also agree about the video. I just had a call with ULI Urban Plan, which is like a school program that I'm involved with, and we had a really bad experience with one of the schools because none of the students would turn their cameras on, and it made it really difficult for us to have the session. So, and I think, we all have acknowledged the responsibility that we have in being here and representing the community. So having the videos on, I think is important. With the chat, I'm one of the chatters, so I apologize. I think my hesitation with, removing the chat is that, we all know how long full board meetings are. And I think there's a lot of people who have things to say. And I think if everyone had the opportunity to say one thing, it would take forever, and it's impossible to keep comments brief, especially as I am going on right now. But I think that there should be, I guess what it is with full board for me is that there's a pressure as it gets down the line and in the sequence of events that we have to go more quickly, and already that not everyone's able to raise their hand and or feels comfortable taking up that time from so many people. So I would just question how we can make space for that without putting pressure on the business session and making sure everyone has a chance to say what they need to say.
Thank you, Jessica. David, and then I'm going to pass it to Nilsa.
I mean, I you know what I feel about the video because I raised it. So, but I would say in the chat, I think there's pros and cons to it. I know in trying to manage the meeting, I think, Marissa, you hit a good point. And I've been thinking of this and maybe asking Rev or another person to, and Carly's been helpful too, is to monitor the chat while we're going. Because, if I'm trying to conduct a meeting, and I like to look at people and see their body language and see their, and it's hard to manage the chat sometimes, and you miss things that maybe, people then say you're not addressing, or you're not, or the chat can be used as an agenda. People raising their own agendas in a meeting and drawing attention from other people into that agenda item when that may not be appropriate for the meeting or would be discussed in its own time frame as opposed to that moment. So, I think there's pros and cons. I think there's a lot of good information that goes in the chat, but if you're in the presence of running a meeting and you got to take minutes, right? It's a lot then to manage the chat too. And I got two screens. So I got the chat up here. I got the agenda up here. I got y'all here. And then the other thing, I mean, this is a lot to manage for my dyslexia. And, I go from things to things all over the place. But, I got a bunch of new members that I don't really know. I could walk by them in the street that are in my committee that I don't know. And I think, presence, whether it's chatting or whatever, we need to maybe regulate it better and limit some of it. But I don't know how you do that, right? And if the public can't see it, then we shouldn't be chatting. Because if it's a public meeting, it needs to be seen by everybody. And if it's not seen by everybody, then it shouldn't happen. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Angel and Jessica. I'm going to pass it to Nilsa. I think there are a lot of sentiment shared with that. And I can tell you it's very difficult to conduct a meeting. Intonation, if you know your membership, is one thing, but facial expressions when we can't see body language is a step further in connecting when we're opining on subjects. So, Madam Chair, would you like to take it from here? And then
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I'm having trouble with my headphones. So this is a conversation that since the very beginning with Zoom meetings and the chat and the raise hand function that we have discussed and have concerns with. One of my concerns is when we're conducting a full board meeting, that separate conversations are being conducted in the chat and different discussions are being had in the chat that no one else is privy to. And unless I stop what I'm doing and stop my intention on the full board meeting to see what's raised as the chat, a lot of times we don't know what's going on. That is not how an open meeting should be conducted, because if not everyone has access to the chat, if they've called in, then they're losing a lot of information that can potentially be raised if someone raises their hand and puts it to the people attending the meeting at large. This way, everyone hears the question and it gets answered appropriately. There are meetings that I've attended that absolutely do not have the chat function because they feel that the meeting is conducted through the face-to-face, through the raise hand function, and that nothing else needs to be going on because all questions should be put at the chat. In other meetings, the chat is just used for questions, not for comments, not for dropping in information, but just strictly as an avenue to ask questions where someone else then reads the question in the chat and it's answered out loud. Any resources would then be emailed to everyone who has registered for the meeting. So yes, I believe that people should be seen at the meetings. I think that people who have not given a bio for the website should, because that's also a way for the community to get to know people that were appointed with as little information or as much information as you want to share. I have reservations with the chat because sometimes I'm looking and a full board meeting is just chat after chat after chat after chat. And then their positions raised. We've had board members who've opined in things in chat that it's almost like they're not members of the community board. They're opining as individuals. Well, I want to remind everyone that when you are at a community board meeting and you are a community board member, your opinion reflects the community board. And so if you say, I'll give an example, people don't want, the community board doesn't want to hear our opinions. I'll remind you that the community board you are a part of as well. So I think that we need to be sensitive and careful how the chat is used, how information is disseminated. And I don't think it's a bad idea to try a meeting without a chat and use the raised hand function and see how it goes. But I defer to you all in terms of your opinions, and then that's something that we can explore further.
Thank you. Madam Chair, would you like me to continue this portion of the meeting?
Yeah, could you? Because I'm having trouble in and out of my headset.
Okay. All right. Please do.
Okay.
Jason, if you would hang on just a second, I just want to recognize Jose, who has raised his hand, so we could hear his, and then we'll circle back to you if there are no other further raised hands, just so we can allow all the members to have to be recognized. Thank you, sir. Jose?
Can we, I'm not sure because I don't use Zoom that much, but is there a way to turn off the chat? Is that even an option?
Yes.
I understand that it is an option, so we can turn
Yes,
off.
it is.
What about the private chats?
I do not know about whether turning off board member chats, but I think when the chat is off, the chat's completely off. I think that's the functionality of the program. I don't think they can actually
Okay.
parsed out within the
I was just
the
curious.
application. Yeah.
I think there were some upgrades recently to Zoom, but I don't know that that was one of the upgrades.
Okay. Was that your only question, Jose?
Yeah, that was my only question.
No, thank you very much. Jason?
I will agree that during meetings, at times, there are things like in my public safety meeting, a few months back, there was, someone that was consistently giving comments that really weren't appropriate, and it's hard to control. So, but it can be useful. It's like any tool, right? Depends on the people that are using it.
Agreed. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Jose. Jason?
Yeah, and also there's a function, I don't know if you guys ever seen it when you're a participant on full board, that there's just an area for answer for Q&A. So it's separate from the chat. The chat is a more like text function that's public, but it's only to us. Like everything we say as panelists, we see. When the public responds, or the participant in this case with Zoom's terminology, we see it, but we see their responses, but they can't see ours. So, for me, in the interest of respect to my fellow board members and giving you my hour, 3-4 hours that I'm here and I'm present to listen to each of you. And I think that, and you guys know I'm very passionate. I am extremely passionate. So I'm all for the rallying, sometimes the activating, but that could happen offline. Those conversations can happen offline. We have processes. I know you guys, when you go through Robert's Rules of Order, that show that we can have more discussions, more open discussions. We as board members can sign up as speakers. There's a lot of opportunity for us to still be respectful. I personally, every time, if I look at back, let's go look at the chats. I know it's record, but go look at the chats. I don't agree that most of the time it's functional and respectful. I think it's 90% of the time is disrespectful or undermining the conversation that's to be had, because a particular individual has a position or a stance, and as stated by a chair, they're not reflecting their leadership as a board member, or understanding that that's the role that they're playing right now. So I think in the interest of respect, I think we should try it. And, and I'm all for open communication. I do think it's a little challenging with Zoom, but I think if we have more moments that we say, okay, this is open for discussion, and we don't really just shut people down and we let them talk, I think the chat function, just like in full board when we was present, you guys weren't getting books of comments from people because they were meeting physically. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much. And we have Nye, who's just joined us. Nye, you had a question about Zoom meetings, and we're discussing currently with the being on camera, public member, as we're accountable public members. Here's a quick brain dump: questions using the raised hand functions. And the final bit is about the chat function and about limiting the amount of chat and how it can derail conversations that are sidebar and limit from the actual public engagement and being in abidance with the open meetings law, or for those who are dialing in. So that's a quick brain dump on top of Jason. So your question, comment?
Yeah, it's two-part. Thank you, Xavier, for taking the time to catch me up. Good evening, everyone. It's two-part. One is a part of recognizing the digital divide that many of us, even as board members, and also our committee members and the public have, in terms of being able to fully participate on screen or with sound or via phone or otherwise. So I'm just want to make sure we're being conscientious of that, and kind of think about how we move forward in an inclusive way. And then secondly, I didn't know if there was anything that was ever shared, because I'm as a new chair, coming in September, about facilitating those chats. In other words, Angel and Marlene and Carly do a whole opening that talks about why we're doing the Zoom and what the procedures and policies are, but we don't really do a housekeeping opening statement. And so I just, was wondering if whether or not we need to have, if you're going to keep the chat, we have a housekeeping, or if we're going to give rules about, raising hands or using the Q&A button, we don't really have like an opening, and whether or not we need to, draft something that then all committees have. So we're all doing the same thing, because for many of us, we're on different committees. And I do think that as the public comes in, it gets a little weird if one committee is doing the chat and another committee is not. And then just last part, also wondering, do we ever give something to the chairs or to the committees about what to do if someone's being, very negative or disruptive in the chat, and what's the best way to deal with that? I was just on something else earlier today where someone got into the chat, and it was someone who was trying to bomb, of course, what was going on. And our office has protocol on what whoever's running the Zoom and what the staff should do when that happens. And I was just thinking, we don't really have that. Luckily, I don't think anything negative has ever happened. But just to be able to facilitate better meetings, we may need to have some of those protocols in place going forward.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nye. We, in some of the other meetings I participate, we talked about like chat bombing, or they're just like throwing a lot of information out that may be or may not be relevant. So I think it's something for consideration of this body and for the chair and for the staff. Having had to chair several of the full boards, it is very difficult to conduct the meeting whilst people are putting in chats or questions. And I think it's, again, we must imagine we're sitting in the same room together. In my opinion, if you're having a chat with 10 people over on the side, then you're not participating. And then there may be a question, oh, what was just discussed? And we think about how that impacts and elongates the meeting. So I think that's my humble opinion on it. I know Nilsa's opined. Are there any, Nilsa, yes, I see your hand back up. Let me check. Go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. So thank you for that, Nye. When we started the Zoom meetings, we got trainings through the Manhattan Borough President's Office, and a lot of the protocol that we received from the Manhattan Borough President's Office, and what Angel and the office staff and we were able to put together. And I'm very curious as to the protocols that you mentioned that you've looked at in terms of, let's say, your meeting today. If you have any protocols or any housekeeping information that you think we definitely should look at or consider and can share, we would be happy to look at that. We have been talking, Angel, Xavier, and myself have been talking about the protocols for Zoom meetings and what needs to be expanded. And believe it or not, this was a topic. This is why this is going on today, this conversation. And so this is a topic that we're looking to expand upon, because I don't think that we're going to go back to in-person meetings anytime soon. And somehow I believe that this will always become part of the procedure for community boards in one way or another. So if you have anything you can share in terms of handling negative situations or chats that you'd like us to look at and consider as we're putting together more information, we will be very happy to look at it and very grateful.
Okay, I see that question. Thank you, Madam Chair, was raised to Angel. If he wants to comment before I go back to Jessica and Jason, or would you like to wait until the end?
I'll wait till, I'll defer to the members, and then I can speak after.
Okay, I just wanted to keep things on rails. Jessica and then Jason.
I think Jason had his hand up first.
Okay, Jason, do you want to quickly comment, and then we'll start?
Yeah, no, it's real fast. One, I don't know if there's any like rule against it. With my committee, if we need a sample, because I know we're concerned. I know we try to be real liberal and open, and we want everybody to feel a part of. I get that, but I also was stating, like, to me, it's about the respect. It's about being present and not undermining the conversations that I had. I think a lot of off-topic conversations can happen offline. So I would love to utilize the SDN committee to sample it if you guys would like, with taking out the chat. We never use the chat in my committee. And we have city elected officials come to our meetings. I mean, and that's my recommendation. And then second, to Nye's point, the administrator of this program has absolute control of all functions. So if we, I think once we define the policy as brought up by the chair, then it'll be easier to roll call out that process. You could get rid of the chat, keep the answers and questions. And basically, if somebody's rogue and disrespectful, the host has every right to kick them out of the meeting. So.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Jessica?
Yeah, just really quick, talking about accessibility. I know I mentioned this to you, Xavier, but I thought I would bring it up to the full committee since we're talking about it, about closed captioning and different language barriers. I think I spoke with someone from outside of the community board about the community board who knew a lot about the community and how many people speak Spanish and how that is a barrier to participating. And I know it's expensive to have translating services, but I just think it's so important and worth talking to the powers that be to help provide that for us in some form. Thanks.
No, thank you for bringing that up, Jessica. I appreciate that. We in full board, we do have closed captioning. It is in English. Any way we can explore adding that in Spanish and a closed captioning, I am supportive of. And I think that's a good segue with that kind of back-end operation and functionality to pass the baton for this to close out point 3. Angel? Yes,
so
you.
the Civic Engagement Commission can coordinate providing language services for community boards on request. We just have to let them know in advance. So what we could do is just promote that is something that's an option. We can promote that better so that folks let us know that they're going to be attending and then they need such services so that we can then request those services, and then the Civic Engagement Commission will provide at no cost to the community board. Similarly with sign language, they can provide that as well. Same thing. As long as we let them know in advance, I can double check with them and to find out exactly how much notice they would require. Prior to the Civic Engagement Commission, I think it was like a week and a half or something. It might be less now, but I will double check with them. With regards to, and thanks guys for sharing your thoughts about the chat thing. I don't think, let me say this more positively. I think that the chat can be abused and has been abused. And I think it is out of order. I think we should be trying to the extent possible to replicate the in-person meeting experience on Zoom to the extent possible. And can the chat be used in a helpful way? I think so, but I think it's very clear that it needs to be. I think there need to be guardrails and rules. Otherwise, it's just open season. There have been many occasions of folks just losing their head in the chat. And the public losing its head is easy, okay, whatever, people don't know how to behave in a meeting, but our members repeatedly. And it sets a very bad tone for the public. It says it's disrespectful to continue the use of that term to the meeting that's being had. So, it's unfortunate that people need guardrails, like we try not to be too heavy handed, like these are all the rules. People don't like to, be, set up with rules. So you kind of like expect you expect that people will behave like adults or, professionally, but then they don't, and then you have to put rules in place, right? So a number of other community boards have been surprised that we don't have very straight rules. We've been a bit more kind of, behave yourself, assuming people would behave themselves. Other boards are very clear. The question and answer feature, I don't think we should ever use. The poll thing, if we can keep it to like board members to do a quick, non-binding poll, I think that's cool. I don't think we should vote that way. I think we should vote, on camera, verbally. The idea of being on camera, I agree with. I also think that people that may have an issue from time to time, whatever it is, a private issue, should communicate that offline. Say, hey, look, this is going on. There's a particular sensitivity. We're, for the most part, good people, with the exception of Xavier, and we're going to be understanding, right? But, you know, for the most part, I agree we should be on camera. You know, if, I don't know, you're in a weird place or, you know, you have a leak or something, okay, then fine. Just let us know, hey, look, my apartment's under repair. And that's okay. Or you have to like eat for a second. But otherwise, I think we should be on for the same reason you guys have listed out. I think, not I think, the chat, like the first couple of months, you know, I'm very comfortable being grouchy. And I said that I'm not looking at the chat. So you can say whatever you want in the chat and ask 1,000 questions. I'm not reading it. I will never look. So when people say, hey, Angel, did you see the chat? I'm like, no, because I'm not looking. I'm looking at your guys' faces and I'm looking at the hands and I'm listening to you guys speak when you're called upon. So we tried to be helpful with the instructions at the beginning without being too heavy-handed. But if we need to add a bit more, like per Nye's suggestion, okay, yeah, sure. But that's easy enough, right? You know, if, you know, some folks need more direction, other folks just kind of know how to act. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Angel. And I see there's no love lost. Right back at you. So anyway, no, thank you very much. This has been a very fruitful conversation. And I see we have a through line here, and that's great. And I think we'll revert back, Nilsa, Angel, and then we can, I will defer to what their decision is and whether we explore trying it without the chat, get feedback, and then reopening it. But I will leave that to an exploration with and decision to be made by our chair, and for that discussion to carry on. Closing that matter out, as I don't see any other hands, I'd like to go on to Robert's Rules of Order. There have been questions. And what we are doing, we had originally, a couple years ago, had a cheat sheet that was 2 pages long. And some of the membership have had questions on how things go. I am working on condensing that further to 1 page. So it's a hot sheet. So you can literally look at it and say, yes, we are voting. We have a motion. I move. There's a second. If it is a committee recommendation to approve something, it's fairly obvious. We've gone through those training sessions with Gail Brewer's office and the borough president. If it is a committee's recommendation to not approve something, that's where people start to get a little wobbly. You are, and again, I'm going to keep it very simple. You are adopting the committee's recommendation not to approve. So if you are supporting that, you will be voting in the affirmative, and just basically keeping that very simple. Also, too, it's going to expand upon abstentions. There have been some questions raised. There are about 5 different reasons one can abstain from a vote. And one can vote something out of committee and then abstain or vote no at full board for a variety of reasons. This document will not draw out that in a great amount of detail, but really say you can abstain because 1, you don't have enough information. 2, you agree with everything, except you may have a disagreement with 1 or 2 issues, but you don't want to give it a firm no or a firm yes. It's not enough for a yes, so you were like, it could be for something for political expediency. You don't want to rankle people and get them upset, but you're just not feeling comfortable. And it could have been something you voted for. Again, or it could be something you have a question of whether there's a conflict of interest, and it could be a mild conflict of interest that you have a question, but didn't have time to go to COIB to raise it. There are certain issues that are very direct, like, you could profit, you have business, things like that. But there could be things that, and they have come up before us, but it's basically a simple cheat sheet that we're going to present. We will bring it to this committee to review. So there are questions next month. Are there any questions to that matter? Jason? Jason, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I lost it. I'll write it down. And
Are there any other questions? Okay.
Oh, I got it back. I think it's, I challenge the chairs to this. I mean, I don't know about any rule against or for it, But I think in the sense of open conversations and discussions, I do think it's healthy that if, like example, if my committee is moving towards to support or not to support, and then a member abstains, or if they're present not voting, I mean, I get it. That tells you there's a conflict. But if they abstain or it's a nay, I don't see anything wrong with engaging with them after the fact to see if there's a way to have them have to understand more of their scenario. I mean, if of course, if it's a hard nay and it's because they're completely opposite and it was understood during the process, I don't think that that's the issue. I think a lot of it happens when you think everybody, I mean, and again, of course, we all have our rights to how we vote. You think everybody's in the same understanding, but like example given for the statement of district needs, when we voted for it in October, we had I believe a newer member that was, say hi. We had a newer member that was present, not voting. And we had another member abstain. And I understood the abstention a bit, but I didn't engage further. But the present not voting was conflicting to me that somebody would have a conflict with our statement of district needs and budget requests.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Jessica and then Nilsa.
Thanks. I just have a quick comment about Robert's rules in general. I'm still learning. I've been around it for a long time and it still is difficult for me sometimes. But my one comment is that in full board, you know, again, with the time constraints and there being a lot to say and a lot of people who have something to say, I think I've had some concerns, I guess, with how quickly we move into motioning and that there's, you know, I think it could be a little bit more clear about here's our time for questions, you know, and once the motion is made, there's a time to ask any questions about the motion and then, you know, some sort of process that I just fear that that conversation and debate is sometimes stifled by how quickly the motioning process is moved forward.
Thank you, Jessica. I will comment on that after we hear from Nilsa.
Thank you, Jessica, for your comment. This is why I consistently, when we have a motion that's presented and there's a second, then we open for debate. And when we constantly have people that try to cut off the debate or the discussion, because of time constraints, it is an issue. It is an issue because while I recognize that full board meetings are long, on the average, they're just as long as other community board meetings are. And when we don't do full discussions or we try to rush a process and we don't listen to everyone's discussion in relation to the motion, sometimes we have discussions that go into different directions, or we have someone bring up an objection and then they word it differently. Someone else gets called and then they come back and they word it differently, but it's the same objection or the same point. So we have to be aware of having fruitful discussion and then having it put towards a vote once everyone has had the questions answered in regards to the motion. That is why it is, to me, to go back to something that was discussed, that's why you have the raised hand feature, so that people can get recognized by the staff and they can get called upon, as opposed to putting questions in a chat that may not be being looked at, and then people say that we're not answering their questions. So I do agree with you, Jessica, in that sometimes it may appear that we're not giving enough discussion to certain motions, but I also challenge the board because there are times when board members do not read the material that is provided. And so when they come into a meeting, they ask questions that, one, are in the committee minutes that have been circulated, or two, can be answered by just the reading of the materials. So consequently, a lot of times what happens is that people get impatient, board members get impatient when questions are asked that could have been answered if there had been advanced work done. So those are things that, you know, that we have to look at. And how do we get board members to come and be as fully invested? We all work, and we all have different reasons to be on the board, but I think that everyone who signed on the board has to recognize that there's a lot of work to be done. I hear constantly that we are volunteers. Yeah, we only volunteers in the fact that we don't get paid, but we, every single one of us, put ourselves in this position to work on behalf of this community. And so it's incumbent upon us to spend the time that we need to make sure that the decisions that we do and the way we guide our committees takes into account as much of the community input that is documented, so that when we make motions and we make resolutions and we make you know, when we do things in terms of forums, that it's because we're the best informed that we can be. So yes, there is, you know, Robert's rules has to be, you know, has to be looked at, should be condensed according to the way the work of the committees and the community board works. But you have to be familiar with, you know, with everything. Robert's rules can be problematic. You know, I have issues where, you know, in committee work is discussed, there seems to be consensus, and then a committee member at the full board meeting takes an opposite view without really giving an explanation why, or votes present not voting, or abstains. And, you know, there are very few reasons why you should abstain, and abstain should not be used just because you disagree with a viewpoint. That's why you vote no. So I think that each of us have to look at how we use Robert's rules, understanding the abstain, the present not voting, what an aye is, and so that we can make sure that we vote appropriately so that it makes sense to everyone who is actually looking at the meeting or reading our minutes or when we're conveying a position.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Angel, I see a hand in the camera, I presume.
I don't have the ability to raise my hand.
You're the host, right? Go on.
Yeah. So I've talked about this Robert's Rules stuff for like forever. Robert's Rules is like 300 pages. Nobody's memorizing that nonsense. But it is a guide for us to be able to have, you know, for anybody to have a, you know, a organized meeting, right? And it's a lot of rules because people are always going to find some way to make an excuse or complain about something. And you know, our obligation is to conduct the meetings by parliamentary procedure. That's all. It's not to, you know, abide by every single letter of Robert's Rules, whatever edition you happen to purchase. Even the parliamentary procedure that was guide that was, you know, written up for community boards is a bit extensive. And I had spoken about this with Xavier. I think that, I know that the community board can create its own procedure, you know, guide for its own membership, establish its own, not a guide, establish its own procedure for how it wants to conduct meetings. So that's one thing that may help folks. Like, most of the time you're not gonna have any problems, but then when you run into a bump, then you have that guide to reference. I think the other issue that we have in terms of, you know, meetings and having the debate, like to Jessica's point, is one, there's a step before that, right? So the understanding, the expectation is that whatever the issue is thoroughly vetted at the committee level, and that a very informed position is then being put before the board for ratification. And then that the person carrying those motions to the full board, which is the chair of the committee, will do a good job in relaying what that discussion was, what the debate was, and then what the motion is. And then back to us establishing a procedure, having a procedure then to reference when we're having the discussion at full board, so that there is that time for discussion. Like that, I think, because, you know, I'm deluded, will help so long as we've informed the board well what is on the table. There'll be less need or desire to relitigate at full board, right? Ideally, you're not relitigating at full board. Ideally, you're ratifying at full board. That doesn't mean that you have no right to discuss or raise questions. You certainly do. But I think then that's when the procedure comes into play. Like, okay, then how do we do this? And then spell it out to Jessica's point. Like it's, so when a recommendation comes from committee to full board, then it's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And one of those steps could be that the discussion. Okay, whatever steps preceded it, and now if Jessica, who's not on the, what are you on? On the housing committee, has a question about whatever the housing committee put up, then that can be discussed. But I think that needs to be spelled out. Then it makes it a bit easier, or makes it completely easier for everyone to know, like, okay, this is what we're doing, and we're in step 3 now. And then as soon as this part's done, then we go on to 4 and 5, ratify and get the hell out of here. To the point about long meetings, right? It's been my experience observing board members and the public that board members don't actually mind long meetings. They mind confusing, unproductive meetings. They resent those. You can have a half-hour unproductive meeting and the members are about to set the place on fire. But if the members, think that their time is being respected, that they're able to follow, even though they're not on housing, they're able to follow what's being presented, then like, okay, fine. And they're okay with it. They could be there 4 hours, 5 hours, like this body had a 4.5-hour meeting like a year or 2 ago, and they all left out singing Kumbaya. And I'm like, good gracious, stop talking. I have to drive to the North Pole. But everybody was happy, right? So long as we're, being smooth about it. So, hopefully this thing that we draft up, will be helpful in that regard. And so long as people are digesting that idea, like, okay, you know what? Our deal is at committee, we're going to be super thorough. And then at full board, we're going to give you this opportunity. And those debates will happen sometimes. Most of the time, they'll be like, yeah, fine. Just pass it, just get it out of here. But sometimes, yeah, like, you have something really weighty, and people want to talk. Jason might have a question. Jessica might have a question. I might have a question. What about this? Did you think about that? Oh, you did think about that? What did you land on? Explain how you landed on that. Explain this to me so I understand better. Now I'm on, okay, now I get it, fine. So I'm not voting on this to like, sure, yeah, that sounds good. Or no way I'm voting for that, right? It's the confusion that, in my observation, is the most frustrating to board members.
Thank you, Angel. In the draft, we'll forward it out to this committee. I do want to talk about, it's about 700 pages right here. And regrettably, we don't use but maybe 2 pages of it, to be honest with you. I think in 2 years, we've actually had a motion to lay on the table, which means indefinitely to like stop discussion and move on.
We've never had that motion.
I think it was at committee. It was at committee.
He's making it up.
Said.
It's not true. It's not true. Don't believe a word of it.
Okay, Angel. All right. Get the it's
now.
All right, I'm coming for him. I know where you live. No, but we've had, like, if you remember Frances, look at Frances as well. She would also stand up on her chair in her heyday and she would throw down.
Frances knows Roberts.
Yeah, and we would have these discussions. So
don't mess with Frances.
And what I'm trying to say is that at best we can, and here's the thing, and then Angel and I discussed this, we often say, I want to make a friendly amendment because I'm not going to nix everything. It's just an amendment. We just call it a friendly amendment because it's more palatable. And really what you're doing is maybe striking a word here, inserting a phrase. That's all you're doing. When we say, look, we just don't want to discuss it anymore, it's not literally saying we're going to lay on the table indefinitely. It's like, look, I want to not discuss this anymore, and people just lay it there and that's it. But I think what we're trying to do is put it in a very simple terms, which is the Robert's Rules of Order are the rails we go on, and it's the rules we agree to, so long as there is some connective tissue to it. And I think that's what this is getting at so people are not confused. We don't do anything super complex. And so that way we have a reference point. And culturally, we have changed over the past several years, where you used to have all the debate up front and then accept an emotion, when really what you're supposed to do is a motion is second, go into the debate and the discussion. Everyone, as per Robert's Rules of Order, is you're supposed to be afforded one time to ask a question and speak on a matter. That's it. That's all you're guaranteed. That is it. It's at the chair's discretion, whoever's conducting the meeting, to engage further with that in a fair fashion. And oftentimes when, and again, this goes back to our decorum with the Zoom meetings, and in general, just raise your hand, you will be recognized. But at a certain point, the debate gets cut off, because then the question can be called, which means like, we're gonna have a vote. So again, gonna draft it, send it, want comments next month. I have one more question from Jason.
Just maybe a recommendation. I love that you brought up Francis. When I first got on the board, and even when I used to come to watch publicly, I remember playing that role of Parliament. And then I know she stopped, and then the chair switched. Maybe it might be interesting to try to bring that individual back to light, or that position back to light, so that you just constantly have that board member that is assisting in that process and educating.
If she is pleased to do it, I have, we always love having Francis involved. No two ways about it. If there are no more questions, I'd like to move on. Nilsa, I know we had a brief discussion about codifying processes, and do you want me to carry on, or do you want to lead in with it?
Continue, because you go in and out.
Okay, so staff and Nelson and us all conferred, we're finding that despite the training that's offered by the borough president and everything, that there is a need for us to prepare some kind of codified process to help the committees when they're going through their deliberations and taking positions, whether it's being on track to write a letter approving or disapproving, whether writing a resolution, you're kind of like your hot sheet of things you need to check the boxes and what you should do. And so we're working on that to kind of create a better codified process that will enable all the committees to function on a higher level of accountability, so they can say, okay, yes, we've definitely done all this. Because when we're moving very rapidly through helping our community, which we all care and love, we figured like this would be something that could be, again, like Robert's Rules of Order, having a hot sheet. It's again a reference point so people can go back to it. Have we done this? Okay, I still have questions. Who do I go? I go speak to the chair and to the staff, and we try to navigate the process in a smoother fashion. So that is going to be forthcoming as we go through executing goals. Angel, I don't know if you would like to add anything to that point, or Nilsa, because I know she's breaking up. But again, it's something we discussed just because we want to make things easier for everyone. And we're finding that it's a much more, for lack of a better phrase, it's not like a patently obvious kind of thing you would think it would be, but we want to make it very simple for everyone so they can just function straight out of the shot. So I see one hand from 9.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I'm happy that you guys are doing that. I would also say that if we have like a chair switch mid-season, I think also doing like a little mini refresher, because like I know I'm someone who, thought I was doing something a certain way, and then, I'm happy to learn and learn the right way to do it. And so I watch, like I was on Borough Board this morning. I go on, the community board website and all the informational sites and watch those tutorials. But I do think, in the future, we might want to just have it that if there's a switch mid-cycle, that we actually maybe have like a one-on-one with that chair to walk them through how to do the letter and how to do a resolution and how to do the votes and like the chat situation and just all those little things that now we're doing this in a situation. For example, when do you go to the bathroom? When you're on one of these, if we were all in a room together, we could leave, when you're at Mount Sinai, you can run around the corner and go to the restroom and come back. Now you have to turn your Zoom video off, and people may take that as you're not paying attention to them speaking, especially if you're the chair. because you might just need to go to the restroom. And so all those kind of just little things that we take for granted now that we're on electronic might be helpful going forward. Like I said, especially I'm honored to be the chair, and I'm so excited to learn all this stuff. But I think that I'm really happy you guys are gonna put that little cheat sheet or toolkit together.
Yep. Thank you, Nye. And we are, again, this is an evolving situation with how we're trying to function, and as frustrating as it can be. We're trying to get it all done together. That's really what we're focusing on. So I'm going to go to, and again, this is going to be expansion on the training series from the Borough President's Office, but contoured to our needs. Jessica?
Just really quick, because I was reminded by, and Nelson's breaking up. I also had issues with audio, and I think through that process, I learned that there's a Zoom technique. Sorry, this is going back to Zoom meetings, but there's an ability when you log on to a Zoom meeting, sometimes it gives you the option to have Zoom call you on your phone. And I've noticed that it's so much more clear, and that my computer can't handle both the audio and the video. So it's easier for me. I used to have to dial the number, and it took a lot of time, but if there's an option to set up in Zoom that Zoom can call you, and we can provide that to people, I think it would be a lot easier for a lot more people to communicate effectively during the meetings. Sorry for bringing it up now.
No, that is fine, because I think, again, that's inapplicable across all of our processes and how we evolve going forward. But I would say that with recommending this to our membership, having a good relationship with your vice chair, who can then take the helm, who is prepared to then, like, okay, I'm having an issue, I'm gonna sign off and come back on. That's, again, little bits and bobs we can add it. And so when we have this draft form for next month, I'd appreciate your comments so that we can all make it a better guidance document. If there are no other questions, I'd like to move us along.
Can I have one follow-up? There was something I put in the chat earlier when we were talking about Zoom meetings. So since we just went back to it, I didn't see an answer, but I didn't know if we were supposed to use chat, which is, do our Zoom meetings have the closed captioning activity?
So ours do not. Angel did address that with, especially when it comes to Spanish language and whatnot. Our borough board does. And we're going to have a conversation with that when it comes to the Civic Engagement Commission, right, Angel? They should be able to handle that as well, correct?
I was referring to translation.
Can we check on that?
The closed caption feature is, tonight was the first night that I've heard that referenced. I hadn't thought of it. So I will look into it, just a short answer. But just a reminder to folks. So the community boards don't manage their own Zoom accounts. Remember, the borough president purchased the licenses for the community boards. So I'll have to reach out to Beta NYC, who's administering on behalf of the borough president on that particular setting or whatever. And if I can do it, I'll certainly put it on. I honestly have never looked at it, but thank you for raising it. And if I can't do it, then I'll check with them and ask them to put it on for us.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. All right, I see no further questions. I appreciate all of your comments. This is very helpful. Moving on, agency relationship development and maintenance. This is something that's been ongoing. I know, David, and I'm just calling you out because you have talked and opined about the relationships that were not as reciprocal in the past and how we have built upon those and nurtured those relationships. Parks has always had generally a good engagement with those agencies. As we enter our response period for the budget, it's not a one-off. Nilsen and I and Angel, we've all talked about, these are relationships we should be developing and maintaining throughout the year. I know with Jose, they're dealing with 23rd, 25th, PSA 5, the DA's office and others. But I think this is something that on a regular basis, checking in, having them either come to the committee, or you as a committee chair and your vice chair should be looped in. And I think that's something that's very important. I think you've seen both Nilsa and myself, we keep each other looped in. So in case anyone has to step up last minute, or I've had to tag in, we're not left in a lurch. But I think, again, if you have questions, please reach out to your liaison. to facilitate an introduction. These are relationships that can bear fruit later on. And also too, it's a constant maintenance, because many of those relationships that are built after 3+ years, someone may move upwards, laterally, or outside of an agency to another agency or into the private sector. And making sure that you know who their teammates are will allow for a smooth transition with our process. And when something doesn't need to be multiple emails and months of wasted time, it could be a quick phone call to their counterpart or whoever is taking the reins. So that's just something we wanted to raise. Nilsa, you have your hand raised. Please, Madam Chair.
Yeah, just to speak to what Xavier is talking about, I want to recognize that Jason, as part of the budget committee and when he took over, both him and Xavier really pushed to have the committees reach out to their agencies so that they could develop the relationships. And that is something that consistently has been pushed by the budget committee. And it's gratifying to see that the other committees are doing that. And I know Youth and Education worked a long time to get back into good graces with some DOE staff. And so we are seeing the fruit of the hard work that's been put in reaching out to our respective agencies that work with our committees. But it's important that while that's happening, that these things are documented and also shared with both myself and the staff at large, right? Because this way we know who's being reached out to. We can sort of figure out who we need to reach out to or who is not responding to the committee for whatever reason. And if we need to then put a request through the office from the chair or the vice chair to add weight to the committee's request, so that we can do that, so we can help facilitate those conversations. But I just wanted to take a moment to thank all the committees that have been working really hard on trying to establish those relationships. But I especially wanted to recognize the budget committee's hard work in reaching out and trying to get answers and meeting with electeds and trying to coordinate responses throughout the committees.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've been very appreciative to work with Jason. I think we made a very good team on that committee and strengthening it. So thank you, sir, for your service. And thank you for all the work that we're doing together. If there are no further questions with that, we will sound like a squeaky wheel. We'll be reverting back to this. And please, again, it allows us to function better when you CC Nilsa, myself, and the staff, so that if there is an issue, it can get escalated right away. And if we don't get a response, we go to the tippy top with Gail Brewer. And if Gail doesn't go get a response, you know that there's going to be rain, and it's going to rain like fury, and she's not going to have it. So that's how we kind of function. She knows we get the good work done, but this allows us to facilitate, document, and then when we go in to have a conversation, we're on point and can advocate for the people. So with that, okay. Next will be reminder so December, I know we were all exhausted, 2020. You should give yourself a pat on the back. It was exhausting. We adapted. We did a lot of good work, and we were all in the same trenches as the rest of New York City. We have asked for you to reach out to your committees for community advisory boards and community advisory councils appointments. Many of these that we have seats on are on hiatus because of COVID, are not meeting regularly. Early on, over a year or so ago, Nilsa had reached out and talked to members who would have the capability, this specific set of skills to sit on those cabs, but they did not have the bandwidth. And we have, as expressed in December's meeting, we need you to talk with your committee members, ideally not your vice chair, someone else who can be identified and elevated to sit on one of these cabs or community advisory councils. Some of them are activated right now. We had one today with the 125th Street Task Force, and that was a productive meeting. But again, this is a reminder, we would like your people you would prefer to present who have that capability by February, and by then we will have a notice on which ones are active or are still on hiatus, so that the chair, Nilsa, can consider with consultation. Are there any questions? Nilsa, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, well, what I want to say is that with appointments to these community advisory boards, there's an expectation of report backs. And I've spoken to Xavier about creating a small form that can be filled out with where the agenda can be attached and where a paragraph can be written up as to what was covered at the meeting, so that that's included in the full board report back, or at the very least, because it's an advisory board of that the whole board is supposed to participate in. So that would be included in the minutes for the full board, and nothing would preclude the committee member assigned to give a report back to their committee, you know, where they attended a, let's say, Metropolitan CAP meeting this month, and the discussion was this, and that, and the next meeting is happening then. This way we can have, if there are any questions, the work that we do ideally needs to be documented in many ways as possible, so that as the general public and as the community has questions, that we can be responsive and give them as much information as possible. That's why report backs are important. That's why at the full board, you talk about your reports and your minutes, and we talk about what we've done for the most part. So that will not deviate with any appointments to outside external boards. The expectation is that a mini report will be given, written up for inclusion in our documentation.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I see 3 hands. I'm going to go Marissa, Jessica, and then Nye and Jason. That or Marissa?
Just quickly, was there anything sent out about the community advisory boards that are, I mean, what the lists are? What
It was shared during the meeting in December. We can get a copy of that sent out to you and everyone on this committee.
Great, thank you.
It was shared during that committee and reviewed then, but we can easily send that out for a refresher. Absolutely, no problem. Okay. Jessica, not. Oh, okay. I see.
Oh, no, sorry. I just lowered my hand frame.
Okay, so presuming the same question from both you and I.
I just don't want to drop the ball on this. So I don't remember that, you know, being shared, or maybe I missed it, but I just want to make sure that in relation to my committee, since I'm a new chair relatively, that y'all let me know if there's a community advisory board or council that I need to be paying attention to. That would be super helpful. And I'm sorry in advance.
No, it's fine. It was shared on screen. I don't know if it was actually, the link was on screen. I don't know if it was actually shared in via email, but we can have that sent out. So we'll make sure that is done, so you can at least review and say, oh, okay, these are the ones that exist. Some may be applicable, some may not. There are some that the seat is, I know we've had it on the drive, but we can double check to make sure it's up to date. But some the chair automatically sits on because it covers all of the committees, and but in such case that will be listed. Real quick, Jason, and then David.
Sorry, I was just trying to give some info. Yeah, it's definitely on the drive. I look at it every day. It's on the drive. It's a part of the attendance and contact sheets that's given to us as chairs, as well as it was re-shown to us at the December meeting. So yeah, I, just like I've advocated for a long time for us to engage with the administrative agencies, lately I've been advocating and I appreciate the leadership taking this on, advocating for us to now build those relationships with our local community-based organizations, and building these relationships and going to their meetings. And I've really seen it effective in youth and education with our chair, David, who on his own would go to CPC meetings and go to other other community-based organization meetings, and how much that assisted in the conversation when it comes to district needs and budget requests, right? Just to give like a simple example, like the Museum del Barrio provided a presentation. And again, thank you, Marissa, for that meeting, because they pretty much told us they don't know where they're going to be in 2 years financially. And simultaneously, as which we'll talk about at the budget portion, I look at DCLA, who tells us utilize existing resources and or go to your elected officials for this request. So that right there is already a red flag in my perspective, looking at it as a budget chair, with a concern that we might lose a community-based organization in our district. I'm not screaming fire, I'm seeing smoke. And that's where I think us being a part of these cabs not only influences our constituents, but educates our chairs and our board members about the trials and tribulations that are going specific for our district. I know that a lot of these cabs aren't necessarily meeting because of what's going on with COVID. But again, the same way in the last topic where we challenged everybody to keep building the relationships for the administrative agencies, I also do the same for the CBOs, both private and public, profit and nonprofit, please. And if there's any way I could be of assistance, you all have my number.
Okay, thank you,
So
Jay.
just very quickly.
David, your hands up.
Yes, go ahead, Xavier. So just very quickly, I think on one level, we have assignments for these particular committees, but we don't always fill them. So MetCab has 2 positions for Community Board 11. And I know I've been a representative. I know Drew Jones been a representative on our own, but there's also an appointment through the borough president. And we need to fill those positions. And I think Jason's right, being at the table and having that information. And I want to say further, I think one of the things Carly did with both us, youth and education, and also with parks, open space and parks, was we put some of these committees as standing agendas. The DA's office always comes to our meeting, the community affairs. They have a standing agenda item. The CEC, both the CEC 5, and we finally got them there this past meeting, CEC 4, and then DOE, the superintendent. And we've had the superintendent at 4 of our meetings since she's been here in May. So again, I think trying to maybe have those as standing agenda items and inviting those people to come. They don't necessarily have to come every meeting, but we did work hard to develop that relationship. Now that I'm on the CEC, I may not be able to be on going forward because they're now trying to limit how many parents can come from certain schools. And although we have 24 schools, there are only 5 different schools representative with 11 members of the CEC. 171, the CPEs, TAG. Those are the schools that are represented in the community, but they only represent, 1/5 of the schools in our community. So DYCD, we have as an standing agenda item. We have a decent relationship with them. But I want to say that since we've done the Zoom, when we have these meetings now that we've had more representation from ACS, from Parks, and all these other people on Zoom where they may have not come to a real live meeting. So I think, Nelson, you're right. In the long run, this is going to be a combination of live and Zoom and ensuring that we reach a greater population of the public. So I said too much.
No, thank you, David. I think what's important though is that when we in the past have made requests for people, they don't have the bandwidth, and I do agree that it's important that we spread the wealth and the responsibility to our membership, and that's why we've requested that you as chairs identify members who can participate, because after you've asked 3-4 people to participate and they're like, I can do my 3 meetings, the 2 committee and the 1 full board. So we think it's important that we have that representation. Now is a good opportunity that many of them have been on hiatus or limited virtual meeting, that we can fill those roles. And thank you, Jason, for dropping that in the chat. Let Angel opine on the full, well, this is just our committee list. So, okay, here we go. Yeah, so you can be able to search that. So moving on, thank you. Now we go, if there are no other questions.
I have something to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, you weren't showing. I had to switch back screen. I didn't see your hand in the camera.
That's all right, buddy. We're here now. So that sheet on the internal committee lists thing was an attempt to get our chairs to assign people to those things. So I'm glad this is that the members have shown an interest in this. It is, like what's been said here about, getting people to sign up has been a challenge. Getting people to report back has been a challenge. So, if this conversation leads to those spots getting filled and for us to share publicly who our representatives are on these external bodies, I think that's a good thing. CB3 does that. I didn't know they did it before. I'm like, that's smart. And I think that we need to be clear for external bodies that we have a seat on and we're appointing someone to, what the expectations are of that appointee to report back, as Nilsa was saying earlier. But then also, having a distinction between external bodies where we have a formal seat and external meetings that we're asked to, they were invited to, to sit in like, once or twice or whatever. I think in either case, you can report back, there are many private meetings we're invited to. I think, in that case, you have to, use judgment. But if you're invited to, some other body's, meeting because of, for whatever reason, I think you should also report back. But there's a distinction. I think we have to understand the difference between we have a seat and we were invited to a meeting. I think it's important to draw that. And then lastly, and this is a bone to pick, we have to refer to things by their proper name. The meeting today was I'm not smacking at you, Xavier. It's easy to get confused. But I had a discussion with another member about 2-3 weeks ago about the similar thing. The meeting today, since it was brought up, was Councilmember Ayala's 125th Street Working Group.
Yeah.
The 125th Street Task Force is something else. And then there's a development and so on. It can get confusing. So I'm bringing it up. I'm glad you mentioned it so that I could, offer this clarification and encouragement to other folks to ensure that we're using the right terminologies to avoid folks that aren't in the know, like all of y'all, from being confused.
No, thank you, Angel. And that was my mistake.
No, it's fine. It was a learning opportunity.
Yeah. So I think, but yes. And we do have very confusing, as you can see on the shared list from the 125th Street bid, the 126th Street Bus Depot Task Force, the 125th Street Development Task Force. It goes on. Harlem Burial Ground, Henry J. Carter, and so yeah, I think, and I appreciate that correction.
Yeah. And there are additions to be made to that list because they're like that was written
a couple of years ago, if not
8 years ago.
Yeah.
And we just, kept, like, oh, we should talk about this. And then, oh yeah, tomorrow. And then tomorrow never came. So just full disclosure, that just happens.
Yeah. So,
and this is Nilsa. And just to clarify, just if you're looking at the list and you don't see a name, that doesn't mean that we haven't been attending meetings when they're offered. Xavier jumps on meetings, Angel jumps on meetings, I jump on meetings. So while there may not be someone formal, for instance, the Friends of La Marqueta group is a group that's meeting that is that right now it's a board and it's working towards assisting EDC with La Marqueta and how it will roll out. COVID has not been easy. I attend those meetings. So it's not like we don't have people that attend those meetings. We have people on the UMES board. I am the person on the UMES board. Why am I on so many boards? Because a lot of the board members said they didn't have the bandwidth. And so not only am I the chair here, I'm on several boards that may be reflected on that list. So I just wanted to be clear that even if you don't see a name attached to certain things there, that doesn't mean that CB11 isn't represented on that list. What we want to do is look to formalize, to assess what we have, to see what changes we need to make, see what groups we need to add, and then see how other community board members depending on the board and interests, can lend support in representing that are interested in being appointed to those external boards. And so that's where we are with that.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing since Jessica raised it up? So there's one external board that relates to your committee. It's the Randall's Island, what do they call themselves? Park Alliance. They have a board, and we have a seat on that and an appointee that was appointed 100 years ago, and we haven't seen since. Robert, Richard, something or other. I have no idea. I've never seen him.
Yeah.
So we gotta definitely change that then.
Ramon
Gonzalez.
something. He's a doctor or something.
So thank you, Angel. And I think I'm going to go to Nye in just a moment. But again, we have been attending these meetings. And again, the outreach has been initiated. And you will often see in our reporting back, either through verbal or through written report, what has happened. And those are those opportunities when they say, are there any questions about the reports? That's the opportunity in that public forum to ask for specific questions. Or if it's brought up here, that is another opportunity. But typically that is presented in the reports before full board. So real quick, Nye and then Jason.
It's just who controls who has access to the documents that we have? Because I asked for the link to be dropped in chat, but I don't have access to open it.
Joe.
Thank you.
Okay, you should have it in a moment, Nye. Thank you.
Hold on, slow down. I'm in the middle of a meeting. You'll have she'll definitely get it, Xavier. Don't.
Did she?
Give me
Wait,
a
the question
second, buddy.
is, I know
You'll get it, Nye. Don't listen to
I get-
Xavier.
I know I get to go next, but also did she use the right email address? Don't use your personal,
Yeah.
use your health email might automatically have access.
Yeah, I'll follow
Okay.
up offline because I think
Yeah.
the other thing is like I don't have Gmail. My computer doesn't use Gmail.
Oh, cool. I got you. Yeah, because the district needs emails how I access all the board docs. Thank God. It really wasn't a question. It was just a comment. Again, I love the effort in us building the board. You know, we worked so hard for the last 4 years with you, both with all this leadership, but definitely, obviously, it being spearheaded by our chair and district manager. And I wanted to thank you because me seeing this now is the next stage of us functioning more on our foreign affairs outside of the board and building and collab. You know, you'll love your term, Jessica, where as opposed to cross committee collaboration, now we might get cross boards collaboration, especially when we're talking about challenging any issue in particular, like the East River Plaza or economic development or so many other scenarios. And I think that, you know, there are a lot of boards out there that are small, big, whatever age, state, local, that once we start getting a part of these CABs and we assist our chair and our vice chair in getting engaged, I see even further development for more opportunity, for more positions to open up for our body. With that said, I love that it was one of the reasons I really brought this up was because it was in a report or it was spoken about, but it wasn't discussed or deliberated at the committee level. And I think that that's where in us having some of these appointments would really assist the chairs in being in the know-how. Because like with Diana Ayala, I don't know how, Marissa, I can't speak for that role as chair, but when I heard Diana Ayala talking about this 125th Street, not the task force, but the working group that was responding to 125th Street's sanitation, which red flag, Jose, they lowered sanitation's budget in our community in the middle of our council member picking up garbage. But that aside, we could talk. You know, it floored me that process was happening and that some other committees could have been engaged or assisted or even acted other groups within our district. And I think the more we have these open conversations, the more reasonable, you know, our requests could become when it's time to make these deliverables, like the mayor's response that we have to do in the next 30 days. So again,
Yeah,
thank you all.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that when a task force or working group is formed by some other body, for instance, like Diana Ayala, she selects who she's going to invite. Oftentimes it'll be the chair of the board, and in consultation, let's say if she feels she needs more representation, then she'll ask. So for instance, if I'm invited and I am, and Xavier joins in and Angel joins in, we have 3 people that are attending that meeting. So oftentimes she's very targeted as to who joins those meetings depending on the subject matter, but she has that core group where it represents police, sanitation, and all that. So that's why it's important, the report backs, so that anybody who attends anything, regardless of whatever it is, if they come back, then we all are informed as a board. So those that couldn't attend can at least be aware and can give suggestions so that the person who was assigned to that task force can bring it back to them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, just on that, and then David, I see you have your physical hand. Just give me a moment. A couple quick notes again, and thank you. We're all aligned, and this has been over the past, I think it's been 3 years. We have shifted culture tremendously to a higher, and I know it seems painstaking at times, to a higher state of functionality. And again, as our chair opined, it's not that they're not attended. This does need some updating. We need your help in identifying members who can participate, because it takes some of the burden off of us having to be 6 ways from Sunday all over scattershot. We can actually have people who specialize in that's what they care about. And they're going to be very passionate in representing and reporting back. And again, so when we have those opportunities to report either to this committee or to the full board, I remember back when Robert Rodriguez was our chair, and he would give his report, and there would be a bevy of questions, one after another, and he would just answer them. And those are those opportunities. So, I'm gonna, David, and I don't know if your hand is a holdover. And the one final note, back to with email and accessing everything. And please, you have email addresses assigned for your leadership roles. When the baton eventually gets passed, we need all that information for posterity's sake, so that whatever new leadership is nurtured into those roles can get onboarded faster. So you're not having to forward a bunch of emails from a private account or whatnot. So that's just one comment I wanted to make. I mean, everything on my vice chair, I specifically, if I get an email to my personal, I send it over there if I'm acting in that capacity. It makes it easier because these records should be preserved. So that's just one comment. So David, real quick, and
yeah, just, very quickly, that sometimes we overlap, and sometimes we're invited to those meetings because of my role with Children's Aid or on the CEC, or just the work that I've done with Ayala, and just speaking of her. So I think we have to be mindful of who we're representing when we go to these, but that, we're kind of there in many different roles and many different facets, and represent different committees and agencies. I'll tell you one thing though. DOE gave me a crazy time with my commitment on the community board and being a CC member. And there was actually a legal case that went to court that said a member can be on both the CC and a community board member. So sometimes these things are very fraught, and that we don't know, we should all be transparent on which groups we attend. And that's why, like Jason said, in the committees, I do say, I attended this meeting, I went to that one, this is what I represented, because it does overlap, but we do need to keep them separate as well sometimes, and be clear who we're representing when we go into a committee that's outside of the board.
thank you. That's a good comment, David. Thank you very much for recognizing that. Now, your hand has been up this entire time. Do you still have a question? Because I'm ready to, if there's no more discussion, to move along to our final agenda item. Okay, all right, since there's no response. Committee reports, I'm just gonna ask, oftentimes we kind of at this committee express, Nilsen and I had a conversation briefly about this, that we often reiterate what we're gonna discuss at full board. I kind of like the highlight reel, the things you're gonna hit. If there is anything contentious, or just giving a general update of things to come as well. So Nilsa, if you want to opine on this. at all? And, or shall we just jump right in?
I'm sorry. You guys are still fading in and out, but I think I heard what you said. So just basically, I know that we all have a lot of information to share about our committees, but that should be, I believe, shared more fully at the full board and within your minutes. So I think that in terms of here, the committee reports should reflect 2 or 3 important items. And if you're looking to cross collaborate, we use that word a lot, but I have yet to still really see evidence of committees really cross collaborating. But if you're looking to work on a project together based on things that were discussed at your committees, it might be a good time to, just say a sentence or two, like, we are looking to do this and we would welcome assistance from the committees and stuff like that. But what I don't, we're going to hear a lot of the nitty gritty at the full board. So keeping it, Xavier likes to use the word highlight reel, keeping it to your most important points would be appreciated.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And with that, for me, if you have upcoming projects and or whatnot, that'd be, I know Public Safety and Transportation had referenced doing a Know Your Rights forum and whatnot, and there are other members outside of the committee who've expressed interest. Just as an example, please, if that's something that's forthcoming, present it. Who will we have come up first? How about environmental, open space and parks? Jessica?
Dang it. All right. So I take my meeting notes and I bold the things that I'm gonna say in meetings. I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, but the highlight reel, let's see. We had Friends of the East River Esplanade come talk about obviously concerns on the Esplanade as always. They're building a coalition and we're inviting them with Civitas to come present at our next meeting to help give us more information on that effort. We had a presentation that was much awaited from NYC Parks and NYC EDC about the Harlem Greenway Link. So this was from East 125th to East 132nd Street. Again, talking about closing the loop around Manhattan, which is a big initiative that they're interested in doing. So they came in December 2019 and are back with an update and would like to come every quarter or more frequently to provide regular updates. I'm asking that if they don't come to the next meeting, that they at the very least come to the March meeting since they're wrapping up schematic designs at the end of this month. And it would be a good point for us to be able to contribute as a community board and get community input. So that's the $227 million budget for the restoration between 125th and 145th, but they're focusing on the waterfront park. Yeah, so they're going to get final design late 2021 and construction beginning 2022. The other potentially contentious item was the old business item of the NYCSI soccer pitch proposal at Peter Minuet and Cherry Tree Park Playgrounds. So we had heard from the mayor's the soccer initiative group, and they had come to the meeting and presented a bunch of people from schools, principals and stuff, and advocating for support of the project. There was a concern at Cherry Tree Park that we had a previous commitment as a board to NYC BBC, regarding Carol Branch's late husband, who, obviously has decades worth of work in the community. And, in all of this effort to reach out to the community, there was this important historical organization to the community that wasn't included in that conversation. And so she came to this committee meeting and basically advocated that she would support the proposal if the basketball courts were also renovated adjacent, but that the 3 basketball courts that are at Cherry Tree are very important to the successful running of their program, and that they are looking to have all 3 of them dedicated in her late husband's name. So there was, some committee members who thought we should honor our legacy decisions to NYC BBC. Others believed that, any new project, without adequate input from the community, that it would still be a good project for the overall residents. So we passed the motion of the letter of support for Peter Minuet, and we denied the motion for the pitch proposal at Cherry Tree Park. I did reach out to the man that Irfan and CC'd Sheena, Nilsa, Xavier, Carly about, obviously the program is very great and we would love to implement it somewhere else in the neighborhood if there was an opportunity. There should be an opportunity for us to play a role in what park gets chosen for that. So they haven't responded, and I'll follow up tonight.
So
David?
Can I ask a question? Yeah, and follow up to that. I think this is one of the things that are interesting. So when they originally came before to the board, they came to Youth and Education Committee about the previous soccer fields that they put in the community and didn't go through open space. And to be honest, we found him a little arrogant in the group, and some of the members called him out of that in the youth committee. And then it's interesting that now he went back through the parks. Now, again, I know that this is where we do some cross collaboration as we're on different committees, and then work overlap because we're on both committees. But, I'm just curious to how that process goes, or that at 1 year it goes to this committee and another year it goes to another. Did we do it wrong a year ago? Or is this really one of those situations where we should have cross collaboration between committees and a task force and meeting these particular kinds of concerns that come to the committee? Because, what wasn't passed, we also supported the playground and got it through within the youth and education. So there is the collaboration, but where should it go? Like we've had history with him as opposed to less on the Parks Committee. And, what people in Parks found was what we had found in the Youth and Education Committee as well. So, where does it go? Where does it end up? And I think, Jessica, you really did say it, we wanted to honor something that we supported, that we were going to name the street after this man and continue the program. And I think some of the members didn't feel it was right to displace one thing that was very positive in our community, when there's definitely land that this other space soccer field could go to. So just thought.
Thank you, David. I just make sure to keep raising your hand. Nilsa, thank you.
Hi, Jessica. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be, I like to try to join the meetings, and I'm sorry that I missed yours. Yours always very informative. In terms of what you just mentioned about potentially other parks in the community, was there any discussion in terms of, let's say, like Poor Richard's Park or anything like that?
So basically, when they came to present at the previous committee meeting, we asked how they chose these parks in particular, and it sounded to me like they presented the idea to New York City Parks, and Sheena made recommendations as to which parks would be appropriate. And there wasn't, I think that was a thing that we mentioned that we would like to be included on in the future. And I think it's also a little bit shady for me personally, because when we were doing budget consultations with parks, and they showed up and said, we want to add a budget request for Peter Minuet because we know there's a project downstream. And without, wanting to say, we're not going to put that in because we don't have enough information. I think there's a lack of transparency across the board with parks that we'd like to know what that project would be. And if it was this project or, in tandem with this, it would have been good to know. But, and we would want to be included early enough in the process that we can help guide which parks that are even being looked at.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Hey, Jess, you give a preview of the conversation you're going to have next month with the Office of Resiliency.
Yes. So basically, we've reached out to the Office of Resiliency for I think a few months now, and they finally responded as of, I believe, this week to agree to attend our next meeting to go over basically the resilience study that George James had foiled without getting any answer, or his foil was denied. So Carly mentioned that we would like to be talking about that specifically, and to better understand resiliency efforts community district wide, so that we can be more informed when we are tasked with giving letters of support to like Metropolitan Hospital for their seawall project. So we're, I don't have enough information. They haven't sent a synopsis of what they're going to be presenting about, but we've let them know that we would like to talk about that specifically.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Seeing that there are none, if we can, thank you very much, Jessica. Much appreciated. Let's move along to economic development and culture. Marissa.
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute myself. So we had a conversation this month. We had actually a lengthy meeting, a well-attended meeting, which I thoroughly was happy about. We had our presentation from Uptown Grand Central, which they come every month just to talk about what's going on with the state of 125th Street and how they are moving forward with dispersing information on the second round of PPP that is currently taking place at this time. So we appreciated that presentation. We also had Pablo Guzman from Union Settlement, who also attends our meetings just about every month, and gave an update on the East Harlem grant. So they have granted out more money. I believe they have around $200,000 left, possibly. And they're looking to, I believe, close the grant application in February. So there's still going to be a discussion about what they're going to do with, with the money. Obviously, they're still promoting it and looking for people to use up the grant funds, but there is still quite a bit available to use. So they are continuing in their efforts with that. We also invited Anna from El Museo de Barrio to present on how they've been doing. I know Jason mentioned this earlier. They have been, okay. Obviously, they've, scaled down. I believe they said everyone has kept their jobs, which was great, but they have modified things over there. And they have a few upcoming events that they will share with the board that people can attend both virtually and I believe at the museum. But they're hanging in there. Of course, they need money like everyone else, but we wanted to make sure that we engage them. We haven't really been focusing as much on the cultural side. We've done a lot in terms of small businesses, which is, really at the forefront during this time, but want to make sure, since we are culture as well, that we engage our museums and other institutions throughout the neighborhood. So she gave a great presentation, and we would love for her to come back just to speak more about what they're doing. Diana did come, and she spoke about the 125th Street Working Group. Thank you, Angel, for going over, because I was using working group and task force and whatever else, but she presented on the 125th Street Working Group and some of the tasks and things that they have been doing outside of just meeting, but also the work that has been done to move forward and push some of the cleanup that's happened on 125th Street, which has been a result of not just the working group speaking, but then also the pathmark that's now being developed over there, and some of the forward initiatives that are planning on happening on 125th Street. So that was her presentation, and very informative. We also had the Cary Group present on 1 East Harlem, the construction site there. And we're still waiting on exact numbers, which Stephen Hayes presented on, and will send over concrete information to us so that we can get percentages on hiring. So they have engaged our community and have all the statistics here with me, but they have engaged our community in terms of jobs on the construction site. They've also thought about what jobs will look like once the building is built and we have commercial space. Food Bazaar will be in there, and I believe they have 2 other spaces. And so there is I guess like a requirement for local hiring to happen within those commercial spaces once they're developed. But again, we will have more information and more concrete information on exact numbers. And then last, we had Barbara Askins from 125th Street bid, and we wanted her to just kind of share what's been going on that side and some best practices. And something that they mentioned, which we are actually also going to do on economic development meeting, economic development, is hold with Union Settlement, with Uptown Grand Central, a meeting on best practices for how to use your PPP dollars, realizing that some businesses are more familiar with what to do with their funds as opposed to others. And so now that we have a second round coming out, it would be great to learn about what's the best way to use those funds for success. We'll also do a portion on marketing, which NIE has agreed to do. And so we are planning that as the second of the third installment of our goals for this year for small businesses. And of course, we went over our budget and district needs. Giselle has been a wonderful representative on that front. And so we are all going to continue that conversation also on a smaller lens to discuss some of the general responses that we got. We got a few from SBS that were just kind of like, okay, we have resources, but we didn't get down to the nitty gritty. So we will have our responses before, I believe it's February 16th is the deadline. But we're working through that.
10th.
I'm sorry?
10th.
10th? Oh, okay. Well, we'll have it before then. And that's my report.
So one thing to add for Marissa that folks may be interested in, so that that respected to El Museo del Barrio, there had been some kind of chatter about representation on the board of El Museo del Barrio, and they did report that 4 new people have been added, like non-dues paying members, like of the community, have been added to their board. Among them, I think it's a daughter of Eddie Palmieri and our former board member, Debbie Quinones, and then 2 other folks that I can't remember, but they're like artsy folks.
That sounds about correct, Angel. Thank you. I have one.
Artsy is not a word, by the way. I recognize that. Artsy is not a word, but you understand.
And I also attend those meetings when they hold them as well. So you have representation from the board as well.
Nelsa is on all
Thank you,
boards.
Nelsa.
Real quick. Yeah, so we're holding it down. Jessica.
Just really quickly, Marissa, I was at the EcoDev meeting in 2019, and El Museo del Barrio had mentioned that they had code compliance issues and that they were having to spend a lot of money to pay in fines because their code compliance wasn't up to code. So I just wanted to see if that was still an issue, and if I can connect them to to get those resolved so that they're not spending that money. But then I also had a question or a point that I was made aware that One Museum Mile, the museum, because of the museum, they were offered in this relates to land use as well, but they were giving a bonus for the museum, and the museum has yet to open really. So I don't know if there's anything we want to do as a committee to, or as a community board to sort of push that forward, or remind them of their commitment to provide a museum within that building.
The African Museum you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
they shifted over to the Africa Center. It's not really a museum. But yeah, that's a good point. So we should follow up with Anna about the first point about the TCO.
Yeah, she
right?
didn't. Yeah, she didn't mention in our meeting in regards to the like compliance, but definitely that's, as Angel stated, that's something that we can mention. They did actually mention that they received a grant from the Ford Foundation, which was encouraging, and that will, help them out moving forward. So they felt like the next 2 years they might be okay, but then after that, not sure. And then in regards to the museum mile, again, I can speak with Angel about that, and we can see if that's something to be discussed at a later time. But thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Marissa. It would be a shame to lose Enema Sale. So I think that's something to definitely keep on our radars. And I was really glad to have Barbara from the 125th Street bit. She's a fantastic human being. And we spoke over the holidays, and I was able to mention that Angel or you would be reaching out. So it was great to have her there. Thank you for following up. Next, let's see, Human Services. Nine.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
So just sorry, I'm reading from my phone. So just a couple of quick things that I want to make sure is on everybody's radar. So we had a really comprehensive presentation from Padmore John from the East Harlem Health Action Center and from DOHMH and New York City Test and Trace. Similar to what's been mentioned before, we have them as kind of a standing invitation for them to come and give us updates about the COVID-19 virus, testing, resources available through the city, and now, of course, the vaccine process and rollout. We also had a presentation from Noel, just kind of as our local point, local public hospital that's providing services in that area. And then we talked about some of the key focus areas going forward in relation to that, one being seniors. And so Xavier informed me that there was a senior task force. And so for next month, we will be focused on a presentation about how the virus is impacting seniors and how seniors can participate in the rollout of the vaccine and what presentations and services we may are being made available to make sure that seniors stay safe during this time. There was also a lot of conversation about those who are homebound, whether they're homebound seniors or they may be people with disabilities or other, and what is being done to get them tested and also get them vaccinated. And so that was key information. The other group that they'll be focused on is youth and young people. They're finding that young people are not readily wearing masks, that are still congregating. And so what can be done around that? And so in the month of February, New York City Test and Trace will be doing a whole program around young people, and they piloted it at Wagner this weekend. And then the next area that they're very focused on is immigrant populations, and particularly those who are at the frontline workers category. And so in the month of February, they'll also come back and report on this, but they are doing a lot to get grocery workers and restaurant workers, as well as taxi drivers, tested for COVID and vaccinated, as their schedule allows. There was a huge taxi driver testing effort in Queens. It's then rolling to the Bronx this coming Tuesday, and then it's going to come into Manhattan, of which East Harlem and Washington Heights is part of their target area. And then we talked about our committee discussion on accomplishments and goals, and just a quick highlights on accomplishments was finally getting Oasis, engaged with our conversation vis-a-vis Councilmember Ayala's group and the work of Assemblymember Rodriguez, that we've had good quorum and strong meeting support, that we had a great event in collaboration with Community Board 8, and that, we've just had great support and leadership actively reduce some of the stressors on 125th Street. And then we just talked about goals, which was just continuing to provide our community with information about COVID-19 and the clusters, testing and vaccine, continued focus on 125th Street, talking about the long-term impact of COVID on our young people, our seniors, and those with disabilities. And then just having a greater focus on NYCHA and people who are in the digital divide. As we discussed earlier, there's a lot of people in our community who are not online, they're not on social media. And what more can we be doing, whether it's like having a day where we organize a volunteer event as a committee or as a board to like put flyers in lobbies or, you know, get flyers to our tenant leaders, A, to make sure they know our schedule for meetings, and B, that they have other information that's important to keeping them safe and engaged. And then we talked about some partnerships with public safety, housing, and economic development around keeping our community vibrant. And then just in terms of old business, we're continuing our discussion about 125th Street and what we can do to address some of the issues there. We had prematurely voted on a resolution, which will be kicked back to committee for further work under the guidance of Xavier, Nilsa, and Angel. And I think that was it.
Thank you, Nye. Are there any questions?
Yeah, now you reference Xavier said something about a senior task force. What's that?
I don't recall a senior task force. I was a little, what I mentioned at the meeting was more that we used to focus on seniors.
Oh.
And not a task force. And I can understand the misunderstanding, but we used to have, we used to have a little bit more focus. We used to have a committee that was focused on seniors ages ago, and that it kind of all got compiled, and that we should call attention to that as well, not let that fall off our radar. But there was no specific task force, and that was clear during the meeting. But yes, I think like saying we're going to also pay attention to that is accurate.
So I just want to clarify again, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. So Health and Human Services is this broad. So when you say, was it just Health and Human Services focused on seniors? I just want to clarify so I know how to structure like our content and our agendas going forward. When you say that, so was it just more focused on the needs of seniors, or was that just a component of it?
It is a component that we should not ever forget, and because we have a high amount of retirees, so that's what it was.
Xavier, I just want to add, because I used to chair Youth and Health and Human Services for many years, and the complexity of the problem is that what they did for seniors was do an activity, an event, and there was a planning of a senior event, a yearly event, and we never did any real work for seniors.
Right.
And as Nye said, this is part of the problem. This committee's gotten so broad that they kept adding immigration, seniors, and then it never had a focus because it could never focus on anything because it was too broad. I'm not saying seniors are not part of human services, but let's make the correct context. It was that they used to do an event, a yearly event, and that was it. That even predated Angel on the board. So, you know, and then it got lost in the shuffle. And then human services has been up and down because it hasn't been able to direct a certain kind of focus or vision. And I think we're moving in that direction. So
yeah,
sorry, but
yeah,
there was no before Angel. What are you talking about?
Is it like
I was here a few years before you,
AM?
Angel,
Is it before Christ, after Christ? So just quickly to clarify then, so as we're planning for February, I did email Marlene to talk about what we could do to focus on seniors. I do think that Health and Human Services does have a health focus because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So we are definitely focused on one thing right now. I do agree with you, David, Xavier, Angel, that we can reshift the human services part of it. And I think what might work, and I'll be sure to add that to discussion for the committee, is for us to maybe each month have a different area that we're focused on with speakers and other content. And that way we can be very focused about the conversation we have to cover all of the areas that we touch on through that committee.
Great. Thank you, Nye. And I see Nilsa has her hand raised real quick. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that at one time, the Human Services Committee had a really long name because they had immigration, seniors. We even had a disability committee at one time, the community board did. And so
a mental
I
health
think,
task force assigned to that committee.
yeah, so I
Willie
think
Mae
that
Goodman ran.
yes, yeah, I know Willie Mae. And so I think that you're on the right track, that you can have a discussion every month, or as you plan out your year, you may decide that COVID might be what you want to concentrate on. And it might be that seniors is something to look at come September, so there's a lot of ways to look at it. So, don't, just because seniors was part of it right now doesn't mean that if you need to shift focus, don't worry about it. It's something that you can plan for in the future, at least, even to just bring resources to seniors, or start that conversation going.
Thank you. I appreciate your input, guys. Yeah, I think that I'll bring it up as part of our discussion for next meeting and put it on the agenda. And again, it could be a combination, like Nosa, we could do like COVID and how it impacts seniors 1 month, COVID, how it impacts youth 1 month, COVID, and how it impacts the disabled 1 month. So we could use COVID as the theme for the year, and then have our target areas, be a subset. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Nai. Thank you, Madam Chair, Nilsa. And one final note before we move on to land use, landmarks and plannings, that we consolidated a lot of these committees that were overarching within Human Services because of quorum issues and participation. So we bundled them all together, and we are definitely finding our way. So thank you very much. Moving on, Stephen, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Hope everybody's doing well. At our land use, landmarks and planning committee, I was actually on bereavement. However, I'll give a brief summary on one of the items, and I'll pass off to our staff liaison and district manager Angel for more comprehensive items. So we had Metropolitan Museum of Art come by requesting a letter of support. They have to replace a section of curtain wall on the facade. There's a lot of deterioration. This requires them to come before the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and they reached out to various community boards, including CB11, for a letter of support. A letter of support was issued. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The committee did vote to provide a letter of support, which will go to full board. There was also a presentation from City Council on a comprehensive planning tool called Planning Together that I will now pass to Angel for a brief summary.
I'll have a summary. Council Speaker Johnson has been on this, supportive of this idea of establishing a comprehensive plan for the city. And I'm not going to pretend that I can present that entire presentation, but it is an interesting idea for sure, and something that community boards and borough presidents and in the communities should be informing themselves on, because it is proposing a real shift in the way that the city is planned and the way that the city will be developed going forward, if this goes through. And there's a legislation on the table that City Council is going to be discussing in the coming months. We don't have a set date for when that starts, but certainly soon. The part that I do have some concern with is that while there's the promise that communities can put forward their own plans for their specific districts, the final kind of word on it is still in the hands of the City Council and of the council member. And it just, that idea doesn't particularly sit right with me, because and I raised this to the presenter, who did an excellent job. What about if the community finds itself in a position where it's proposing a certain idea and it's in conflict with what the priorities of a given council member are? Like what happens then? And it sounds like it's still the decision of the council member. The idea of council member deference sounds like it's still going to hold sway, and that just didn't sit right with me. I do, on the optimistic side, I do like the idea that for example, a given district has a 197A plan, or like in East Harlem, we have the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. And that if that, at the moment in time when this, project is going forward and being, put into effect, if we are still behind that East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, for that to be the guiding document for future development in our district, I think that's great. If all fall in behind that and are supportive of that. Just the idea that it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to happen is a bit off-putting. The presentation is on our site and we can circulate it. It's wordy, but it's not super difficult to follow. It's just like 40 pages of presentations of a lot of text. And I'm going to lie if I'm saying that I've committed it completely to memory. We also have the video of the presentation, which we can share. And I encourage you to, take a moment to watch the video and to read the presentation. That's all I can recall.
Thank you,
Jessica
Angel.
has her hand up. She perhaps has a better.
Jessica?
Then why is your hand up?
Oh, huh?
I just have 2 quick points. I had a one-on-one with Elsie, and we discussed the just like setting expectations with the first presenter that came about the the Museum of Art, and it took like 30 minutes to get through their presentation. So I think if there was a way to distill these sort of presentations where they're not asked, I mean, they may be asking for a letter of support, but that they're going to every community board, especially things in Central Park, that they be condensed to a shorter format. That would be great. And then also I think we have an opportunity with the comprehensive planning framework to think about that moving forward as an opportunity for us to help describe or pre-plan for what we would generate as a preferred land use scenario for the community district. If we start thinking about it early enough, maybe we can get something that's worth putting out there and hopefully getting accepted for our district.
Right. Yeah, thank you for Jessica. And it also, has the potential for us to speak to more, potential for us to lay out plans for portions of the district that weren't spoken to in the neighborhood plan, or even to, scrap that and start all over or fix it, whatever. That's potential. The other thing that I left out that is important is that the idea is that it's going to tie capital investments to the plans that communities are putting forward. So that, for example, the community board is behind something in its statement of needs, right, which is going to inform this whole thing. Our statement of needs process is going to absolutely need to step up its game. All of them, all community boards. But if we're saying, we want X invested in, like this, this plan is going to tie them to that investment. Was my understanding of it. I could be wrong, but that's what I understood, which is good, as opposed to now that we throw, what we think are really great ideas and they're just paper on a shelf until those priorities match up with the council members at whatever given time's priorities, or the administration's at priorities.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Angel. Stephen, is there anything further?
No, that was the summary. Thank you very much, Angel and Jessica, for taking the minutes. It's much appreciated. I just want to speak on something briefly with regards to the committee list that went out just a little while ago from one of our committee members. This is something that, as a chair of a committee, I've brought up in passing discussion to make sure that we're evaluating the use of people's personal information and the sharing of it. I think we need to, as an executive committee and perhaps even higher up at the officer level, consider whether we want to wait for an issue to arise, or if we want to make sure that we scribe some form of policy, or if any exists. For example, people getting unsolicited phone calls late hours at night during an election, completely unacceptable. I think a worst case scenario would be someone showing up at someone's door unannounced. So although as chairs, it's our responsibility to handle these things appropriately, I'm sure there's been other scenarios in the past where this has come up, and I don't know if it's been resolved. So just from an executive committee perspective, it's something I'd like everyone to look at and just make sure that the sharing of this information is done responsibly and appropriately. Thank you.
Hi, Stephen. So when I was the chair of elections in 2015, we did have issues where unsolicited calls were made. People were sharing information. Not only that, in some instances, people from outside of the board were electioneering and calling board members on behalf of other people, which is, it's very unethical in my opinion. And so I created a massive email and I sent it to all the board in terms of best practices in terms of elections. But a lot of that might hold true. And so I'm going to see if I can dig that up. And so then we can work on further refining so that we can make sure that we address concerns, because we have had concerns about unsolicited calls or putting out of private information. And so we just want to be sure that we're sensitive, because we've also had board members who have taken the other tack where they want everyone's information because they feel that they should be able to reach out and to have private discussions. But I think an opt-in situation where there's certain information that could be shared, right? Because if we're a 50-member board, we should be able to find a way to communicate, whether it's in a central location. And so I thank you for bringing that up, and we will definitely look further into how we could address that to make sure that everyone is that the privacy is noted and they don't have to feel that they're being invaded by
Yeah,
board members,
understood.
that people they don't know. Mhm.
Yeah,
Folks, before-
this actually
Oh.
came up as well. I'm sorry, Angel. I just want to
Go ahead,
conclude
go
my
ahead.
point. Gail Brewer's office sent out correspondence, I think in the last 48 hours, with regards to the appropriateness and spelling out a process with regards to the political side of people's work and communications and advocacy, things of that nature. So it just made sense to bring it up in this conversation since it came out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one thing, if I could, sorry, Knight, to jump in line. I did not notice that document was just shared in the chat. That should not have been shared in the chat. That is a private internal document. I can't rescind it from the chat, but please, anyone in the chat, please disregard that document. That's internal use only. That has people's personal identifying information, and we are required by law to not share that information. So I understand that was a mistake, but that should not be shared. That's only for internal use.
Thank you, Angel, very much for sharing that comment. And thank you for raising that, Stephen. Nye?
Sorry, it takes a minute to get off mute. I just had a question as to whether or not we've ever had like a listserv, like a Google Drive listserv, where like we could post something and then people could comment or have a conversation, because I do feel like
It's okay.
we are very
No,
thoughtful
Papi, it's fine.
about people's emails for the most part and conversation, but almost to the point where sometimes it slows the process. Like I might have to email Marlene or email Angel or email Carly to get to other people. And I just don't know if in the past, I guess, Angel, you've been here and also know so very long, and Xavier, if we've ever had like a board listserv, almost if you think like a Google listserv where it's a set group, it's private, and you could post something if you wanted to source from the other executive committee members, you know, knowledge transfer, historical data, you know, I want to work on this, my committee wants to work on that, how should we do it? But have it be like in real time as opposed to 10,000 multiple emails. Then anybody could answer or respond and share that knowledge.
So this was brought up, this has been brought up a number of times by different members for different reasons. So we've been advised to not have a listserv, which I've explained a couple of times. What we did do last year is we created a document for members that's within, what do I call it? The Board Member Resources Guide, which is a text document that includes a number of links, among them a link to the board member's contacts, right? So it has the board member's name and then an email and a phone number, which members opted in to do. Other than that, we have to keep that information private, and we've been advised to not have boards, like a listserv board or a bulletin board and those kinds of things, by the Committee on Open Meetings, to stay away from that kind of thing, because it could be argued that it's a meeting conducted not in the public.
Interesting. It's like, for example, I didn't know, I've only know Mr. Giordano to be in charge of youth and education, but if I would have posted something, learning today that he has that knowledge, how do you be able to tap in and access that? If we didn't have this conversation, I would have never known. Just so you know, Mr. Giordano, I'll be reaching out to you. But those kind of things that come from this, but only happens once a month when we come together, how do we recreate that in between those times we meet? But
right. So you do have that document that you can, you have each other's contact information through that document. And also we've tried to share via the bios that Nilsa's been encouraging board members to post, those other relationships, those other memberships, like continuing with the example of David, he's on CEC4 or however else he identifies himself in his bio. I think he says that, I don't remember. But some certain members will say I'm on this body as well. And that's a way for people to be aware of each other's other activities or other engagements, so that, to your point, they can reach out on those other.
Maybe we just need to add to that what they did, like if they were former chair of a different committee, so that that's helpful, so that we know we have, a mentor or someone else that we can go to. Because I love going to you and Nelson and Xavier, but if there's someone else, I would love to also be able to tap into that information. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. And that concludes land use. Licenses we already covered, so I don't think we have need, unless there's anything new Judith wants to add. Okay, I'm going to move along to public safety and transportation. Jose?
It's my turn. All right. We had DSNY have a presentation for us this month. You're gonna have to excuse me, but my throat gets dry. I gotta drink water all the time. DSNY is proposing a rule that establishes requirements for carters operating in commercial waste zones. In other words, if you're not aware, if you have a commercial business, you need to have a carting permit. When I first heard this, I thought organized crime was strong. I've had my business in the same location for a long time, and there was a time when we were told how much we were going to pay, and we could only use them, and all these situations. And then a few years ago, that was opened up, and pricing became very competitive. You can choose whoever you want. For instance, I have 2 different carting people just in case, because they kind of skip weeks of when they operate. And pricing, for instance, for my business is $35 a month, a piece for each carting. And I used to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 before, $200. So I have 2 cartings for half of what I used to pay. And mind you, since there's no recyclable laws, well, yeah, we'll get into that. I actually take my recycle home. I think in the Bronx, they think I'm running a chop shop of, some kind of operation in my house. So now DSNY, what they're doing is this is a rule that went through council. So now they're creating zones throughout the city. And what they're doing is they're going to have competitive procurement to select up to 3 different private carters to service the zones. So as of right now, I can choose whoever I want. When this rule goes into place, if I'm in that particular zone, I'll only be able to pick out of those 3. Now, what the city says are advantages is that there will be significantly less mileage driven by the carting trucks. And they gave an example of one carting company that went throughout the whole city, went into Jersey and came back. Also, they're going to have customer service requirements. So for instance, I wouldn't need to pay 2 cardings. I would just pay 1. They're also going to have a requirement for collecting recyclable materials, which I'm really happy about. And they're also going to have operation requirements. So this is something that the city is pushing through. They will have a public hearing. Now, the public hearing was supposed to be next week on the day of full board, but that's been moved to February 6th, no, February 9th, I believe. Now, the committee raised a few concerns. My concern that I raised was pricing. The city is putting a peak as to how, like the limit of the maximum they can charge, but they're not establishing really a tier pricing system. So what that happens is that I could end up paying as much as a restaurant, which has a completely different level of waste. There's nowhere in between. And the city says, well, you can negotiate, but the rule says they can have up to 3 cardings per zone, which means that they could technically just have 1 carding. And then if there's only 1, you really can't negotiate. Considering the small businesses in our community are suffering as much as they are with COVID and everything else, it is very concerning for us that the city hasn't put maybe established by legislation, right? This is what they're doing now in their rulemaking, a tier system, right? We would hope that they would develop a tier pricing system. Right now, what they're doing is by weight, and they're, I don't know if you guys have seen, if you have a large building, they go in, they pick up the whole, that big cart, dump it in. There's not that much of that in our neighborhood, right? You see garbage bags go outside. So that was the first situation. The second committee raised was the MWE participation. And besides MWE participation, a pipeline into the commercial waste industry, which I'm not sure how the city is supposed to make a legislation for. Basically trying to push MWEs into this kind of business district. And I just don't have enough information, but it's something that was raised. It sounds good. I thought the MWE itself was a process in order to help minorities get into different kind of businesses. And the third point is that a carding system can win the zone, but they can also subcontract, right? So there's about 90 different carding companies in the city. So if I have a large company, or I know how to handle these kind of applications, I can win the contract, but then basically subcontract to someone else and kind of abuse the system of that subcontractor, which happens in different situations. Right now, they have a lot, the city in their presentation said there was a lot of cardings that are paying under minimum wage and certain safety requirements are not taking place. So even though the main company that wins it can have everything in place, if they're subcontracting, there should be something, more substantial there. Now, we were supposed to have written testimony because we had an action item to bring to executive, and we have a situation. I'm still recovering, and my focus is not all there, but it's completely my fault at that point. So what we would like to do from the committee is to have someone speak at the public hearing on behalf of CB11 with these kind of concerns. Obviously, these are our 3 points that we have so far. And since now it's past full board, I'm not sure if we can bring it to full board, if we want to. Now, the actual wording of it isn't yet in place. Those are our main focus, those 3 points. So that's what I have. Questions?
Okay. Thank you, Jose. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing any, Jose, and thank you for being here. I know you've been through a lot. We're just glad to see you on the other side of everything. I just have one quick question about the Know Your Rights Forum that was raised. Are you going to be pursuing that at the committee?
We will be following up on that for this year.
Okay, brilliant. Pastor Isaac Scott and I think Candy have expressed some interest as well. Okay. So, all right, thank you so much for your work and thank you for being here with us.
Then I have a question. So how would we proceed now that, how would we proceed in order to speak at the public hearing? Do we do anything today at the full board, or I could just speak as a business owner, but I thought it'd be a lot better if we could speak at the public. I think Jason's talking, but I can't hear him. Yeah, you're on mute, my guy. And so, I think the committee wanted us to speak on behalf of CB11, but obviously we had a little mishap. So I'm not sure what's the best way to conduct. We still have time. I'm not sure if we do it tonight or if we do it at full board.
Okay, so
guys, how we want to do it.
Angel Nilsson, would you like to define on that?
I want Angel to speak first before I say my thoughts.
And then I'll take questions.
When is the hearing?
February 9th now.
Oh, February 9th. So you could bring something to full board to ratify as a board testimony, or when is your next public safety meeting?
Yeah, but I couldn't, it would be before that, but I wouldn't get, like, the whole point is I would think that I should get permission from the board or the executive.
Well, no, I'm giving you a couple of scenarios.
Okay, go ahead.
Right, so, you can, like you said, an individual can testify on their own. You can testify on behalf of the board, but that should be something the board ratifies. And you can testify on behalf of the committee, so long as it's made clear that it is just a testimony of the committee, not testimony of the board.
Oh, okay.
Like, you couldn't say this is a position of the board, or these are our questions on behalf of the committee. That's certainly appropriate.
Okay.
So you can go either way.
Okay. Thank you, Angel Nilsson.
Basically, I was going to say the same thing, that anything that's presented from Community Board 11 as a position of Community Board 11 must be ratified by Community Board 11. So if it's not being ratified by Community Board 11, but it's committee work, then that I agree with Angel. You can present as, the work from Community Board 11, where it is understood that it's not a position we voted on, but it's based on the work that you've done. And of course, like Angel said, you can always testify as a private citizen or business owner. So if it was something that you wanted, if it was something that you wanted Community Board 11 to vet and make it a stronger position, that the community board weighed in and voted on, then that would be something that I would suggest that you work with your committee and then get submitted potentially by a certain amount of time prior, so that we can vet it. And there's nothing to say that you can't bring it up as new business or under your committee report, where we would then vote on it.
Okay, perfect. We'll do that then.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Nye, you had a question?
I just had a question about at Borough Board, there was the conversation about some of the police reforms. And so I just didn't know if there's going to be plans for public safety to have any sort of presentation. I mean, the mayor today unveiled some new matrix. There was a police reform toolkit that came out. And then there was the conversations also about the changes in terms of police versus, social worker or other staff being responsible for outreach to homeless and the mentally ill who may be home insecure. And so I didn't know if there was any conversations about those items coming up in the future.
The matrix actually came out a few months ago. We've actually been discussing it for a bit. But when we discussed it, apparently it's a very long document in the 300 pages or so. Even the officers from the 2.5 and 2.3 had not gotten around to read it as of yet. So we're going to continue to work on that. In regards to homelessness, actually, we were looking to do a forum this year, which Jessica had requested of me, and she got all the support. And I'll find out where we are with that forum in regards to this particular situation. That's like how we're looking forward to dealing with a homelessness issue, mental health issues, and obviously we agreed that the police is probably not the best suited to handle these situations, but unfortunately they have to handle it because currently there's no one else to handle it. And I'm sure we've spoken about it in committee, where if you ask the NYPD or if you gave them the option of maybe they don't have to deal with homelessness issues, I'm sure that they will tell you right away, they'll walk away from it today, because it's obviously a big problem for them. And it's hard to deal with these situations, and the training's not there. So it's not like they're doing it, in a happy notice, but they're who's having to be, they're having to take that burden. So we're going to continue working on that. I'll ask Jessica where she is in regards to that forum. And by next executive, I'll tell you where more or less, because obviously that is a conversation that requires a whole new department, a lot of funding, and particularly in a city where funding is a huge issue right now. Sometimes that, even though it's wishful thinking, we may not know that they're going to make a department the same size as the NYPD just to deal with mental health. But obviously there has to be something has to be done, or maybe better training for the NYPD. I'm not completely sure what the solution is, but that's what the forum was supposed to be about. So we'll have that conversation. I'll give you guys a update on that for the next executive.
Whatever we can do from Health and Human Services to support it or collaborate, please let us know.
I'll definitely be in touch.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jose. Hold on. I'm going to go to you, David. I just forwarded to you an Angel that was shared at Borough Board, a police reform toolkit PDF. It's about 32 pages, just so you have it on record, and then we can get that disseminated to the committee. Just was doing that real quick, and I know David had his hand up. David?
Just one of the resolutions that we did pass this year was to remove school safety from the police. And that was a resolution that we did in conjunction with CEC. So again, we have taken some positions in relation to some of those issues. But again, this is where it overlaps again with cross collaboration of committees, right? Actually, all three of the committees, Health and Human Services, Public Safety, and Youth and Education, as they all overlap. And when we talk about youth, we also talk about families, right? So how are families being impacted as well? So.
Absolutely. Mental health, I think, is an issue that encompasses not just our city, I think every major city in the country, probably the world.
Definitely, I think we can concur on that. Thank you, Jose. It is, we're nearly there, 9:46. We have two more committee reports. Thank you. I don't see another question. David, did you have another? Hold over. Thank you. Jason, statement of district needs and budget, and then we'll finish up with youth and education.
Good evening, everyone. We had a really great meeting. Councilmember Kalos came. We discussed our accomplishments for the year of 2020, and I have to say, not only were we proactive and on time for every phase of the statement of district needs process, we also added to it, right? Like, whereas this year we did a survey, we were very, for lack of a better word, engaged with the district consultations. We even have meeting minutes. That echoed to some of the thought that was brought up from a lot of the chairs, because I would really push you to review the drives. It sounds like that the Google Drive that's provided for our email addresses, and I don't understand the locking or not locking. I think that's Angel probably could get into or your liaisons can explain to you how to utilize them. If you need some help, we could talk about it. But in those drives, there's a lot of interesting information. That's where I got that Google sheet, because I know it was brought up. That Google sheet was inside that drive. So I encourage you to look into it, because there's information there for your committees about the budget process. Now, there was three documents sent out by Angel. One was the letter to comment, which I really appreciate that we actually now have a term for this phase, because for the longest, I always thought, even as the chair, that we were responding to the agencies, and the reality is that we're not. We're making a stance about the response of the way that we're taking a position. This is how I interpret from all the documents that were provided, plus the trainings. We're taking a position for the letter to comment on what was sent to us from the administrative agencies and OMB on how they're going to allocate the budget. Angel sent 2 documents, and for the last 4 years, we've been looking at one of them. In us being proactive and being further engaged in the process, as I conversed with Xavier, the committee has learned that we could get deeper in our practice. And with that said, I encourage you to check the, there was another document that Angel sent out that was for capital. I would also challenge you to check expense and contracts. That was brought to us by CM Kalos, because at the same day that it just worked out, SDN met, and the day we met, the budget dropped. So we actually got to go through it a little bit ahead. And it was very interesting because some of the conversations we've been asking for years, we resolved with going through this document, right? It shows like community board, it shows the Manhattan, the borough, and then it breaks it down by board, right? Like the Department of Sanitation, like I brought up, these are just the 2 off my head. The Department of Sanitation for our district was cut. And on top of that, we're going to start looking forward to, I guess, disproportion or, being equitable to another board, like another board. One of our adjacent board gets $10 million from the Department of Sanitation, but it will help further in those district consultations. And our liaisons from our committees to yours are reviewing those numbers. So then that way they can further assist on the items that, like example, that was brought up at certain committees about should we respond? Well, if you're going to advocate for the item, then you definitely need to respond. But I wouldn't really look at this phase as a point for questioning as much as utilizing this process for taking a position or stance as to why the item that you submitted needs to be funded. And that's under engagement. We also focused on education, which has been our discussion for our goals since December. And our effort this quarter is to meet with every elected official. So far from our district, the council members we met with was Ayala and Kalos. I know some of you have been appointed by Perkins. I asked that some of you chairs that have been appointed by Perkins to reach out for Perkins. I know the office will do it. I know the staff will do it, but this is me asking for cross-committee collab. If you can ask Perkins' office to come present to SDN to tell us their role in the budget, and we have a format that Carly could send them so we could continue that process and make sure that we're coordinating with the district. So that hands off education, engagement, and our final phase, it's like a triple E process for our goals this year. Education, engagement, and then establishment, which is to define more formulated policies and procedures for the statement of district needs and budget requests, in particular our committee. And what we're going to start looking at, example given, is this year we're going to try to get you all collectively, with respect to your time, to start the request earlier. Usually we wait till August, September. We're running till October. And as you guys have heard, city council and the world of politics are getting creative and looking for more ways, this is my opinion, to go around boards. So if we're using the tools and resources that we have available, like the statement of district needs and budget requests, and utilizing it effectively to advocate against our local officials, holding them accountable to our requests, our demands for our tax money that they're using, I think that the process will be that much more influential for years to come. So that's pretty much big 3 highlights. So to summarize it for what's my asks, we're looking to start the request earlier. You're going to have your deadline, as Angel said, we're submitting by February 15th, 16th. Forgive me if I'm off on a day. Your deadline's February 10th to get the comments. The staff need to edit it, make sense of it, compile it, and then submit it so we all sound educated as we all are. And then the last piece, and I left this for last because I think this should gauge a little bit of conversation because of what like Jose brought up, is pushing the committees to represent the administrative agencies and go testify at the budget meetings. That's something that's been talked about. That's when they'll take us seriously when we're making requests. I've heard that from every elected official that I've spoken to in the last 3 months, both the legislators, the politicians, and the financiers, the analysts. The analysts, who tend to be a little bit more forward, stated, if you don't show up, for whatever reason, that doesn't seem to, it doesn't get jotted down. I don't know how to explain that any simpler than that, but and us being there and advocating for our district, Community Board 11 will be looked at a little bit more seriously, and maybe then our requests will be taken as such. There's a lot of data I've been going through. I will be reaching out to each of you offline, in particular to go over the numbers, because this is the first year, at least for myself, that I'm having the opportunity that I don't have to go through all of the words and the comments of the back and forth, because we have a process for that. But to look at, like, the Department of Sanitation was cut, but they gave another $1 million to the NYPD in our district. And when we have a position of acting, not necessarily for defunding of the police, but reallocating funds, we have a position on that in a resolution that was brought up both by youth and STN last year in the budget. So I guess my question is, how do we, if we have to if everything has to go through full board and ratified, how do we get people to meet at the budget hearings come April or May? Or if Angel, you have a better way of saying it. Thank you.
Angel?
Probably no cookie. You guys are cruel.
Time in therapy, you'll get over it.
So Jay, your question is, how do committees submit testimony? Am I hearing you? Did I hear you right?
I mean, I know submitting written testimony needs to be ratified. My question is them speaking at the public hearings on behalf of the board.
No.
I was under the impression the chair just has to say it's okay. I didn't know I had to go through this whole voting process. So I want to make sure that if we're going to be pushing for that at our, again, we're being proactive for the final phase of the budget process, and we're going to have people, we're going to try our hardest. And of course, it's going to be virtual to have people at these budget hearings. It may not be something that we come up with today, but I do want it on our radar that it's something that we're really looking to do this cycle.
Yeah. So like I said to Jose before, if a committee is submitting testimony, a committee can submit testimony on behalf of the committee. But like with everything else, right? Like the point of the voting is to memorialize, okay, well, this body is in agreement on this position, right? So that it isn't, Joe Schmo speaking on behalf of his committee without ever having spoken to his committee, right? And whatever's communicated in that testimony, usually with testimony, you're asking for something, right? You're saying like, like this is a particular issue, where if you're reasserting a position the board has already taken, right? Like it's something that was already stated in the last statement of need, and the committee is wanting to elevate that or reassert that, a new vote is not required, right? If a different position is being raised or something, a point of clarification or an inquiry is being submitted, that the committee can do. You should always try to get support from your committee. I think you don't want a situation where chairs are just, freestyling on their own. That's just a no-go. If it's a position that's being submitted saying, well, this is the position of the board and it's something different than something the board has already, asserted, that needs to be voted on by the board. But if you're saying Community Board 11, asked for, 13 matches, and we still want 13 matches, then you can say that. But if you're going to say something, crazy, then you should probably run that through your committee or someone else, right? But what we don't want is members freestyling and in the voice of the board. and misrepresenting the board. That's why, like, the encouragement of always, like, running through your committee, get a vote, running through the board, get a vote. It's easier. But if it's just simply, this is a fundamental position of the board, very simply stated and reasserted, then that's fine.
Thank you, Angel, for clarifying that. Jessica, you had your hand raised.
I just, Jason mentioned sort of comparing our numbers and our dollar amounts to other boards. One of the things in Landmarks, that presentation about planning together, they had a slide about the Access to Opportunity Index and the Displacement Risk Index. And I think, potentially we could reach out to them to get that information or use that information against the, to help bolster our thoughts, but just something that we could use. Thanks.
Are there any further questions for Jason? All right, seeing that there's none, thank you, Jason, for bringing that up and also mentioning the reference that Councilmember Kalos brought up. Our district is less actually than half of our sister district in CD8. And one of the things he recommended was looking at the population analysis for how they're getting serviced over the Department of Sanitation. We did have a net increase of 25,000, which we speculated was probably just for overtime. But again, this is the kind of breakdown that y'all can participate in. Thank you for referencing that. It was a great example. Last but not least, our youth and education, David.
So last but not least, anyway, so we had actually a very good meeting. Kind of some of the stuff we talked about earlier, as Nye talked about, we did work on our goals and accomplishments. I do have to commend Reverend Brown and Carly. The month before, we put a list together of ideas that we could work on and things the members wanted to work on. Carly and Reverend Brown really worked hard to put it together, categorize things, and then put it in a survey, which we did during the meeting. And then, took our top 3 answers, and those will be some of the goals we will focus on going forward. A lot of it is becoming more of a presence, becoming more involved with other CBOs and other forums in the community, and really strengthening. One of the things we also been doing is I've invited one of the youth I've been working with since she's 9, she's 16 now, Natasha Rodriguez. She's been attending most of our meetings this year. She is going to apply to be a member for the board, so I've been working with her on that as well. So, that's again some of the things that we've tried to work on, is expand our youth participation and engagement in the committee. The other things we kind of worked on was, one of the main focuses, as we talked about earlier, is how we really worked hard to expand our DOE. So we now have standing times when we ask the superintendent to come and give periodic updates. So we actually had the superintendent, we had the CEC4 president, and the CEC5 representative. So we had a real heavy meeting around education, around some of the needs. Interesting is our district and DOE schools in District 4 is made up about 8,000 and change kids. 60+% of them are in remote learning, total remote learning. The other 3,200 are in the blended model, 2,000 by choice, about another 800 by default because they did not pick a certain model. One of the good things I have to say is that we are really lucky for the superintendent, Dr. Christy Dela Cruz, that is taking over to Dr. Estrella. And Dr. Estrella, I think, set a good path for Dr. Christy to come in, and she's really been wonderful. I mean, even during the meeting, she had a presentation and had the statistics in there, but during the meeting, she was texting people to find out, no, we actually only have 390 devices that we have to support kids in this community. And she updates us as we're in the meeting. She also found out some information from Natasha on Metro cards, again, during the meeting. And she's been very much involved. I just want to further say that due to the principal at the school having COVID and being out, and the whole administrative school leadership team being out, the superintendent spent 2 weeks at PS 72. So I really got to spend some good time with her. We've known each other through Zooms. We've never met, but we finally met, and we had, good time to build our relationship and continue to strengthen our work. it's really good that we made the connection with CEC5. They do cover a few of our schools in the northern part of the district. And, you know, we want to make sure that we're tapping in and have the voice of all the kids and all the schools. As I said, CEC was the following day. The superintendent also talked about the changes to the middle school and high school admissions. She gave a more fuller presentation. Again, I'll put some of those things in the minutes and the notes for everybody to review. But I would really just say that I think with a new committee, with so many different agendas on the committee, I'm looking forward to working with this group around issues. There's a new charge. My first goal, my internal goal as the leader, is to get everybody visible on the screen so I get to know people and read body. You know, I am a social worker. So, you know, body language speaks loud for me and I do read it. And, you know, I think it's a very important part of understanding decisions we make and seeing people's reactions. So I am going to encourage that on the committee. And that was pretty much it. I mean, you know, the main goal was to talk about the accomplishments, work on goals, and to have DOE and CEC updates. And that's where we are. So any questions? Any bottles, any bones?
Do we have any questions from the committee? Okay. See that there's none. We can move along in the agenda.
You mean there's more?
Oh, yeah. No, there's no more. So I think that covers any old business. Nope. Any new business? Nope. We've already.
I got old business. Last month.
Nope, not been recognized. Not been recognized.
Sorry.
Didn't raise your hand. Now I see your hand. Now you're recognized. Go on, Jason. We're allowed to have some silliness. Go on, buddy.
No, I know. I was making you wait on purpose.
Oh.
That was my entertainment.
Aim to please.
Yeah, always. Last month, council member invited the chairs for a budget discussion. I threw it in the chat, but I haven't heard anything from anybody. So I don't want to set up a meeting without, you know, following protocol. But long story short, I think we should do it. In my dreamy way, I thought we could have did it before February, before getting us the budget. But, you know, at least while we're doing these comments to the mayor's office, it'd probably be good to see where our council member that has the, I guess, the most radius in our neighborhood, where she stands, and she's on the budget committee, as some of you may or may not know. So it may be good to engage her now on the mode. And what I would do is I challenge the chairs, just look at the three top or your number one pressing issue that you brought up this cycle. And let's see if we can have a meeting with the council member to then figure out how to activate some of the items, some of the projects or the capital projects that have been approved, but because of bureaucracy aren't rolling out. And maybe if we start advocating and doing some of that community engagement, we could get these projects going during this pandemic.
Okay.
Hi, Jason. You hear me? Y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So I think it's a good idea. And so as the chair of the District Needs and Budget Committee, I would not be averse if you reach out to Councilwoman Diana Ayala and ask if she would be willing to host the meeting. And then if she sets up a meeting, she can send it to Angel, who can then and to yourself and to me, and then we can disseminate it among the chairs and see who participates. But at the very least, we would participate.
I'll start on that right away. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Nye?
I was just going to ask if, I think that's a great idea, count me in, but if that could be extended. I went to a different community board for another meeting and they met with all of their respective council members. And so if that similar type of best practice could be followed, that would be great. I know others have smaller parts of our district, but I feel like it's important to touch base with all of them.
I'm definitely all for that now. I'm gonna be honest with you. Some of my strategic interests, particularly in Ayala, is because she sits on the finance committee in the city council, but I definitely would love to reach out to Kalos and Perkins and have those conversations. Ayala offered it right out the gate when she presented. And if we could get Perkins there next month, I'll definitely ask him the same thing.
Well, if you
Thank
need me
you.
to reach out to Kalos, I'm happy to. I feel like he's always given really detailed presentations regarding budget and finance for city council. And I think it would be great for us to tap into his, because he also handles like contracts and ethics and some other stuff, so.
So Jason, reach out to our council people with the same request that you're asking Diana, and then let's see who responds. And based on who responds or doesn't respond, then we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much, Naim. And for bringing that up. Okay, so we have no new business. And we will have full board next week, next Tuesday at 6:30. Be there, be square. And thank you for your efforts and good meeting. Please stay safe out there. And Jose, good luck with your continued recovery. You all have done a good job. It's a productive meeting and it's going to help inform our next steps. And I really appreciate everyone's level best efforts. Roll your eyes, Angel. I'm waiting for it.
It is 10 o'clock, buddy. Good night.
Do you think?
Just cut to the
Call it.
chase. Let them go.
Thank you,
Motion to
Xavier.
The
adjourn.
Knicks are
Good night,
on
everyone.
Thank
Great
you,
meeting.
Next
Xavier.
game.
Thank you, Xavier.
all the way to the next game.
Thank you, Xavier.
They're on the West Coast.
It's on your TV anyway. Thank you,
It's
Xavier.
not. No. I eat, but I don't watch TV.
Thank you, Xavier.
You're welcome. Thank you. I know it was a level lift. Good night, all.
Good night.
Thank you,
Reach out
Angel.
to me when you need to.
And thank you, Nelsa.